So much for hey guys. But hey guys, so good to see you all again. It has been, what, 2 weeks since I last streamed? It's been a while, that's for sure. Yeah, and it was piano practice. So September 11th. So pretty much 3 weeks. Yeah. Ooh. Well, yeah. Hey, everybody. So what's happened in that time? I told you guys about how I was going to be trying to find a job, and that as of the end of August, I'd heard back from Amazon and Google, and I had a decision to make, but I couldn't really make that decision before the team matching stuff happened at Google. So Google team matching, it happened. I talked to 4 teams. I think I talked about this in Discord a little bit, and 3 seemed good. So I went with one of the 3 teams. And that's about it so far. I have not gotten a finalized offer from Google yet. So it's a little premature to be talking about some of this stuff, but I feel like it's almost certain. And the team that I'm going to be on is called or at least publicly, to me, it's called the Cloud Configuration Team. They work on something that's more secretive than just cloud configuration, or there's some special service or product. I don't know anything about it yet since I don't even have an offer. So it's not like I've started there and have secrets to share. But what I do know is that it's based on Kubernetes and a bunch of other technologies that are totally public. So things like this config connector. And so I figured I would just go learn some of these things and we would figure out, I'd just hit the ground running with the job, I guess. So yeah. And yeah, who are you new to Twitch? But yes, welcome back everybody. It's good to see you all. So I don't have anything planned other than just learn these things today. And that's what we're going to do. We're just going to go start. So I'm going to look up Kubernetes getting started. And we're going to see on the official site. I read a tiny bit of the Wikipedia article so far. And I did this at like 2 a.m. the other day when I couldn't sleep. So I read through a little bit about this and I know some of the terminology. I don't really know anything else. I have not used Kubernetes yet. And I have a note that had literally one thing in it that was, I think, the official pronunciation, but I think I'm just going to delete this because I'm pretty sure that nobody uses the official pronunciation. Can I copy just this? Yeah, let's see if I can link this in. I think, Chris, what you're looking for is this command. Oops, that was supposed to be an exclamation point. Does Google use it for their own internal version? Oh, I don't know. Like I said, I haven't even started that. I haven't started there. Excuse me. Ah, nice. You plan to learn Kubernetes too? Yeah. So, Kubernetes orchestration software for containers. It can handle scaling up or down containers, handle communication between them, storage services, etc. Yeah, I think this is still fine. I just don't want to include the pronunciation or anything here. All right. So I think the best way to do this is just via the getting started guide. I've given as much intro as I care to give. All right, let's see. Well, there's different ways to set up and run Kubernetes. When you install it, choose an installation type based on ease of maintenance, security, control, available resources, expertise required to operate and manage a cluster. That's very interesting. I wonder where their installation types are. I don't see any like quick headers for that. But yeah, the reason I find this so interesting is because the way I look at this, any sort of container orchestration that you need to do is typically once scaling becomes important, or that you predict having more specific infrastructure needs than just give me a VM, that sort of thing. And as such, I don't think it's too much for just hobbyist developers. Now, I might be totally wrong on that. That was a fast 5 years. Are you saying because I said I didn't know when I'd be back? I did say it could be a short amount of time. Hey, Aurelio. And so this idea of, hey, maybe we can install a version that is just easy to manage, that's kind of interesting. Oh, you said the holiday to 5 years. Okay. Got it. Isn't health management also valid? Restart when fails? Yeah, if you're talking about just for this tiny blurb here, that's what the etc. was supposed to be. Is like, hey, here's kind of the stuff that it does, so you know it's on a programming language or something like that. Hey, Proxy. Good to see you too. Good to see everybody, really. I know I didn't give out individual hellos, and now I am. So I should continue my hello, everybody kind of thing. If you're learning Kubernetes, use the tools supported by the Kubernetes community or tools in the ecosystem to set up a cluster on a local machine. Okay. So I think one of the things we might need to do is sort of engineer a project for this, but I'm not sure how long I'll be learning this. As I mentioned, right now there's no offer on the table, but that should happen maybe today or tomorrow. And so let's say let's just make some things up. Let's say that it happens tomorrow and I accept. I would be starting on probably the 12th. So that's my guess, which would mean that at most we could have like 7 streams. I don't think we're going to hit 7 streams. I think I'm going to try to hit like 2 or 3 and learn some of this stuff offline and also wrap up some of the things I said that I was going to wrap up that I just didn't. Thank you, Endor, and I forgot all about that. So it's Thursday. Adam is learning Kubernetes for information about Google team matching. Check this out. Yeah, sorry about that. Hey, Journey. Yeah. Okay, and then production environment. When evaluating a solution for a production environment, consider which aspects of operating a Kubernetes cluster you want to manage yourself or offload to a provider. Interesting. Release notes and version skew. I guess let's take a look at this. I've never heard of a version skew support policy. Is the start on the 19th also possible? Technically, pretty much anything is possible between now and kind of the end of November. But I'm looking to start sooner rather than later. My goal, and this was a little bit weird because I couldn't time this all that well. My goal was to have a week or 2 of break before I started the job. I ended up having quite a lot more time than that. Zeton, why are you expressing this opinion? Also, happy 1-year anniversary on Twitch. Anything's possible between now and the end of November. Yep, you can learn how to fly. You can just jet yourself to the moon. All right, supported versions. Maintains release branches of the most recent 3 minor releases. And newer receive approximately 1 year of patch support. This is good to know, I think. I don't think it's worth really writing down. Maybe backported, yeah, okay. And then these are things I've only read about, but that I need to know about the overall architecture of Kubernetes in order to know more about this. Supported component upgrade order. Okay, yeah, I don't think it's too important for me to cover any of this right now. So let's go to learning environment. Installing it with Minikube or Kind. Okay, unfortunately, I don't know what either of these things is. It's a tool that makes it easy to run it locally. It runs a single node Kubernetes cluster inside a VM on your laptop. Why would it say on your laptop? I don't have a laptop here. For users looking to try out Kubernetes or develop with it day to day. So this is one of the things that I think I still want to learn. Yeah, there's a concept section here. I think it's important that I learn those because things like Node, I mean, Node has its own just English definition and most people would kind of know what it means. But in Kubernetes parlance, I'm pretty sure it is something running certain Kubernetes processes on it. And like I said, I know very little about this. Yeah, so this is it. This kubelet, the advisor, the proxy, these all need to be running for something to be considered a node. And then within nodes are pods, and within pods are containers. And yeah, so this would be for a single node. Using Docker container nodes. Okay, honestly, these pages aren't super helpful. At least this one isn't. This is like 2 clicks. A married shift away from it, too complex for you gain a general consensus. Oh, marked shift away from it. Yeah, I wonder. So I have not used it. I haven't learned it before. I know that Amazon had EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service, and I don't know how much these other services end up simplifying that process. So one of the things that I think is interesting is that there's technology that can be general use, but that isn't ever general use because the general consumer doesn't need it, but the enterprises might. And so there's any number of things that fit into this. Maybe Kubernetes is one of them. But when I think about container orchestration, I think, yeah, your average Joe who's going to put a website online is probably not going to care about this or not even need it really. And they're probably going to be hosting with a service that maybe internally uses it anyway. Hey, Bremir. And hey, Tho, did you change your name? I don't. It's you, Thomas. Ah, okay. Got it. I was going to say, I was pretty sure you changed your name. Do you mind typing out your full old name that you had? All right, so it sounds like I could just use Minikube here, but I don't even think it's worthwhile to start this just yet. I think it's more worthwhile to learn the concepts first. Ah, there we go. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Whoa. What? Remy, how'd you even do that? I turned off subs like 2 months ago. And thank you, Avados. Hey, Curious Drive. Yeah, I didn't even think that was possible. All right, let's just go straight to concepts, and then I'll get back to installation later, because I think all of these are going to be things that I need to learn. Did I already learn containers and Docker stuff? Yeah, that I had to do for Botland. So I have a bunch of notes on Docker containers, using it, making Docker files, etc. And from what I understand, Docker Swarm is sort of like Kubernetes, but just made by the Docker team. For starting out, what would be the best CI/CD software to use? For starting out, I think the number one thing I'd care about is it free? And almost every CI/CD software has some free tier on it now. So I'd probably take a look into GitHub Actions at this point. But I was using something called Circle CI for my stuff. All right, so this is what I think is going to be the most important. So let's take a look at this. Concept section helps you learn about the parts of the Kubernetes system and the abstractions it uses to represent your cluster. Oh, cool. They've got hover over definitions, a set of worker machines called nodes that run containerized applications. Every cluster has at least one node. Okay, sounds reasonable. And I think it's worth making a terminology section. So we're going to make that here. Hey, Resfriado, thank you. Okay, worker machines that run containerized applications, and cluster is just a group of nodes. Yeah, I'm definitely excited. I feel a little weird because I've talked about this quite a lot over the last month, and yet I still haven't actually signed anything. So it's possible, although incredibly unlikely, that my plans don't move forward. And if they don't move forward, then that's going to really suck. So I'm trying to just wait until the ink is dry on a contract that has not been presented yet. But it should be today or tomorrow. And maybe I should just keep my email open. Actually, no, I don't think so. But yeah, I'm excited. What tips would you give to a person who's currently looking for a job? Because you are currently. I have a bunch of these. I just actually had published a blog post on the interviewing process. If I'm assuming you mean looking for a technical job, right? Because if it's just a job in general, I don't think I can talk too much about that. But for technical jobs, this was all about interview prep and other advice. I think I've got some things on here, maybe about, yeah, like a resume, cover letter, portfolio. So that's my first bits of advice, and anything else, feel free to ask me about. They're normally fine to do what they promise. Yeah, I don't have any reason to think that this would go south, but you never know. Your date in this is wrong? Oh, no, I wrote this note back in October 15, 2018, but the date, I guess, is not super important. I don't know if you can update this, because I might as well say that it was made today. Then again, if you right-click any line, you can see when this was written. So like the terminology section I just added today, so it says today. But yeah, I'll update this. I think it's fine. I don't know if there's a faster way to change years in this, and since I'm only doing this once, I'll just click it a bunch of times. Yeah. Oh, there was a today button. That was just an accept button. Okay, so overview. Let's start here. What is Kubernetes? I'm going to read through pretty much everything. This might seem like it's very academic. It's not totally going to be. So there were some things as I was reading through the Wikipedia article where I thought, I don't know what this is. So this time around, I'd probably search for why would I use this thing? So this page is an overview of Kubernetes. It's a portable, extensible. I should make this bigger. And then you can't close this, can you? Well, whatever. We'll just do this. Portable, extensible, open source. That's as big as I could probably make it without this thing breaking in the header and me needing to change CSS. Portable, extensible, open source platform for managing containerized workloads and services that facilitates both declarative configuration and automation. Has a large, rapidly growing ecosystem. Kubernetes services, support, and tools are widely available. So this makes sense to me. I already kind of knew this. It originates from Greek, meaning helmsman or pilot. They open sourced in 2014. I wonder when they made it though. They say they open sourced it in 2014, but regardless, I mean, I doubt they made it back in 2005 or something. So this is pretty new technology. Combines over 15 years of experience running production workloads at scale with best of breed ideas and practices from the community. Yeah. Hey, cat. Is made by Canonical of Ubuntu. Kubernetes was made by Google, I'm pretty sure, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, original author was Google, and it's probably still. Well, now it's this Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Yeah. Okay. Hey, War Eagle. All right. So going back in time, let's take a look at why it's so useful by going back in time. So traditional development, you had your hardware, you had your operating system, you had a bunch of apps. Virtualized development, you'd put all this into a hypervisor and put these onto VMs. And so you'd have an operating system in each VM, of course. And then container development is the operating system layer is essentially kind of deleted. It's very thin at that point. And so yeah, you have your hardware, one operating system, and then the container runtime. So you're typically not sharing the operating system level, and this is not in a virtual machine. Hey, Matt. So early on, organizations ran applications on physical servers. There was no way to define resource boundaries for applications in a physical server. This caused resource allocation issues. For example, if multiple applications run on a physical server, there can be instances where one application would take up most of the resources, and as a result, the others would underperform. So for example, you've got a database running and something else running, and the database is like, hey, I want 6 gigabytes of RAM. And the other application is like, okay, I guess I can only use the remaining 2. So that's what they're talking about here. Solution for this would be to run each application on a different physical server, but this is not scale as resources were underutilized. Yeah, so I think these are all super important to know because this is the foundation on which anything that we're going to talk about here today was even needed. Because this is what everybody did like 25 years ago. You got a physical machine, you put an OS on it, you put some apps on it. I mean, maybe you split things up into the VM level, but I think everyone is just probably using physical machines. I don't know how much of this is worth writing down yet, but I'll keep going through. And thank you, numbers guy. Thank you. Yeah. And I don't run ads on my blog. How do I monetize? I pretty much don't care about monetizing right now. So I turned off almost every form of monetization. I turned off Patreon. I turned off Twitch subs. The one last thing that is still being monetized is the courses themselves. But yeah, I don't plan on adding ads to the site or ads to the blog. Most bigger, slower companies are doing it so until today. Yeah, I guess if they've got a history of having physical machines, but I was going to say most new companies probably would at least go with a cloud platform and then pay per month. Oh, the mic volume might be. Wait, you want me to increase it? It should actually be much louder than it normally is. In fact, it's probably peaking, right? Yeah, I think I need to turn it down a touch because I'm seeing it in the red. There we go. Mic sounds good? Okay. Yeah. He's satisfied. Yeah, it was louder than usual. Yeah, I think I still need to turn it down. Sorry about that. And you said you turned your speakers to max and it's still low. Yeah, I think this should be much louder than it normally is. I had it set to louder because I was the last stream I was doing, I was playing piano and I had a very weird audio setup for that. Yeah, sorry for sorry for being much louder than normal too for anyone who's used to this. So virtualized deployment era as a solution, virtualization was introduced. It allows you to run multiple VMs on a single physical server CPU. This allows applications to be isolated between VMs and provides a level of security as the information of one app cannot be freely accessed by another application. Virtualization allows better utilization of resources in a physical server and allows better scalability because an application can be added or updated easily, reduces hardware costs, and much more. Virtualization could present a set of physical resources as a cluster of disposable virtual machines. Each VM is a full machine running all the components, including its own OS. And then container deployment era, containers are similar to VMs, but they have relaxed isolation properties to share the operating system among the applications. Therefore, containers are considered lightweight. Similar to a VM, a container has its own file system, CPU, memory, process space, and more. As they are decoupled from the underlying infrastructure, they are portable across clouds and OS distributions. Containers have become popular. So these are some notes that I hopefully have in the Docker notes that I did, although I don't think they're organized very well. Yeah. I don't think this is organized the best. And this is what happens when you take notes as you're learning a technology because you don't know what's going to be important necessarily. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about like history slash purpose. So this has some overlap with containerization in general. And I'll put this here. Although maybe it's better. There's going back in time, why you need it and what it can do, what it is not, and what's next. Yeah. Hey, Chris. Will I casually stream when after daily job life starts? I will probably. I'm not sure what it'll look like. I think the most likely scenario is that it's still some kind of tech-based learning streams. I don't think I'm going to do piano streams again. I don't think I'm going to do gaming streams. So I think this is really kind of the only thing that makes sense. Alternatively, the other thing that makes sense is some like small project. So who knows when those will happen or what they'll look like. Right now, the reason I'm learning this is because the team I would be on at Google would require this knowledge. So it makes sense for me to do this. Check this out, Blue Monster. Hey, Orange Ray. Yeah, lock picking. I guess we could do that too. Okay, so this has some overlap with containerization in general. When people were running on physical machines, applications could not easily be isolated, and it was harder to scale resources. Well, it was harder to effectively use the, I guess I'll write fully utilize the resources of the machine. So physical machines, virtual machines. This allowed for isolation and better utilization, but the operating system needed to be duplicated in each VM. And then containerization is the, I guess, what do they call it? The container runtime. Helped each container share the OS in a lightweight way. Containers are essentially hardware and OS agnostic, so they can be moved between nodes easily. Yeah. Is this a copy paste of something hilarious? I ask because of the tone of the message. Do I have a write up about how the Google interviews went? I sort of did, but it kind of boils down to there's usually NDAs on interviews. And so what I had talked about is what prep helped. And that ended up turning into my blog post. So if you end up going to adamlearns.com/blog/ whatever this is, I'll just paste it in the chat. This talks about, I think, pretty much everything that I have to share about this. Unfortunately, it's quite long. So yeah, I think these conclusions are kind of what you might be looking for. So if you just look at that section, that's probably the interesting part for you. Has it been nice to have days off? It was, except that my goal was only to have a week or two. And so I started kind of just wasting time and being a slob, and I didn't want that to happen. But I also couldn't really expedite team matching or the offer phase. Now, if I get the offer, which should happen, like I said, today or tomorrow, I should be able to expedite the start date to be, potentially even Monday, but more likely the 12th. Yeah. Okay. So as they're decoupled from the underlying infrastructure, they're portable across clouds and OS. Yeah. Okay, I think this is pretty good. They become popular because they provide extra benefits like agile application creation and deployment, increased ease and efficiency of container image creation compared to VM image use. Yep, sounds fine to me. Continuous development, integration, and deployment provides for reliable and frequent container image build and deployment with quick and easy rollbacks. Yep. Dev and ops separation of concerns, create application container images at build and release time rather than deployment time, thereby decoupling applications from infrastructure. Yeah, I think that's an important one. So the formal phrasing of this is that containers are decoupled from the underlying infrastructure. Yeah. And by the way, these are mostly reasons to want containers. They're not reasons to want Kubernetes just yet. But Kubernetes is about container orchestration. But for anyone who's wondering why would I want Docker, this is pretty much the bullet list right now for that. Observability not only surfaces OS level information and metrics, but also application health and other signals. Environmental consistency across development, testing, and production. Yep. And this is kind of just a rephrasing of infrastructure agnostic, wherever that was. Yeah, decoupling from infrastructure. Once it's decoupled, then of course it's going to run the same as a laptop as it does on the cloud. Cloud and OS distribution portability runs on basically everything. Yeah. Application-centric management raises the level of abstraction from running an OS on virtual hardware to running an application on an OS using logical resources. Loosely coupled, distributed, elastic, liberated microservices. Yep. Resource isolation and resource utilization. Yeah. All these things make sense. Many people completely burying themselves in unnecessary complexity. They don't really comprehend or master anymore. I still sort of feel like we're talking about Kubernetes in general by talking about maybe like consumer or hobbyist developers. And I don't think that's a good idea. I look at Kubernetes as being like enterprise tech that anyone can use, but that not everyone should use. I think this is why cloud platforms are trying to make it easier for people. And this is why Amazon has EKS and why if I knew more cloud platform solutions, I'd be able to tell you what other ones have. What happened in the job hunt? Check this out. Rather containers isolate me. Yeah, I think this is a pretty succinct way of saying it. If you need this, it's there. It's open source. You can use it. You can learn it. For most people, they're probably not going to need it. I mean, even when Botland was running on containerized technology. We had containers for the account server, the game server, the matchmaker, the overseer, and for Dacio itself. When these things needed to scale, what I did is I just set up an AWS cloud watch alarm or whatever they're called. I don't remember terminology anymore for this stuff. And what it said was, hey, if the CPU utilization goes above 75%, make a new container. And that's it. That's what I needed. How do these things talk to one another? Those were all set up through different AWS, I'd call it sort of primitives. And that was that. So could I have done this in a different way? Yes. Would my needs be vast? I don't really think so. Google GK, yeah, maybe Google Kubernetes engine. Yeah, okay, it's probably that way song, yeah. But so right now, and this is always, I think, a little bit unusual, especially from a stream viewer perspective, is that I'm learning this to learn it. I don't have a use for it yet. I don't have a project in mind. I feel that I need to know this knowledge, so we're learning it. And so some people I think can take that as like, oh, he's planning on using it as a hobbyist developer or something. But it's like, I think this is going to be important for the job that I have, and that's the reason why. But it might turn out that it's tangentially important, and that what's more important is something else entirely. Hey, Richie. All right, so why do you need Kubernetes, and what can it do? Containers are a good way to bundle and run your applications. In a production environment, you need to manage the containers that run the applications and ensure there's no downtime. For example, if a container goes down, another container needs to start. Wouldn't it be easier if this behavior was handled by a system? That's how Kubernetes comes to the rescue. Kubernetes provides you with a framework to run distributed systems resiliently. It takes care of scaling and failover for your application, provides deployment patterns, and more. For example, it can easily manage a canary deployment of your system. It provides you with service discovery and load balancing. Yeah, so there's quite a lot that this can do. A nice debunk. You never know when you'll be able to make use of things you learned, even for things you're not learning for your own sake in projects. While that's true, this is something that I think technology is more vast than any single person can learn. Like, let's say you want to learn everything about juggling in your lifetime, you probably could. I can't imagine there's so much knowledge that you can't learn it all. Maybe you can't do it all, but you could probably learn it all. But with technology, it's different. And so I think that if you could choose between technology A and B of what to learn, chances are there's going to be more value in one of them, even though both will be valuable. So my general philosophy is it's never harmful for you to learn something, at least not technical knowledge or anything. I guess if you learned that like an employee stealing from you or something, that could be bad. But yeah, in general, knowledge is not bad to have, and that's when opportunity cost comes in. Okay, so what does Kubernetes do? Yeah, I want to write down all of these things. I kind of wrote this here. Formally, the features of Kubernetes are, and this is where we'll link to this thing. So we'll just copy paste this over here. Oh, they don't have colons. Never mind. Okay. I thought there'd be colons and I could just use multiple curses and copy them all, but I can't. They're bold text. There we go. Self-healing is just faster to type. All right, so are these helpful on their own without having the extra text? Let's read through this. Kubernetes can expose a container using the DNS name or using their own IP address. If traffic to a container is high, Kubernetes is able to load balance and distribute the network traffic so that deployment is stable. Okay, so in order for us to understand this completely, I think we need to see that architecture diagram. So there is a Kubernetes master. I wonder if that's what's going to act as a load balancer for this. And also, where does DNS resolution happen? Because DNS in Kubernetes is different from DNS as regular DNS. DNS here is, I believe, for something like, hey, I have an account server, so I name it account server. And now I can just type in like, oh yeah, go talk to account server. As opposed to something like on the internet where you'd say, oh, accountserver.com. And then even root level DNS servers could know about that. So like I said, pretty sure it's different. DNS name, load balances. What is doing the load balance? Service discovery? And is service discovery distributed? I think it might be. I think there's some consensus algorithm that runs here. They mentioned Raft in one of these things. And that might kind of be how this does load balancing. And then in that case, any node could probably send the request to a particular location. Yeah, I've heard about DNS over HTTPS. But like I said, I think that's a different DNS than what we're talking about here. I suggest you start taking notes in Google Drive. Why is that, Richie? Because one of the problems that I'm going to have is that I already took so many notes over here that if I ever want to link between them, so for example, if I have a Docker note and I could right click this and say copy link to paragraph and then put that here. And so now this will link to the other note that I have. If I switch, I'm going to have these notes in between OneNote and Google Drive and all this other stuff. All right, so I guess I have some questions here that we'll probably end up answering. I write these down now, not so that I can get the answers right this second, but let's see. So I know that Kubernetes can perform load balancing, but which node is responsible for it? Is it distributed via consensus algorithm or is there a single primary node that handles it? Also, there was something else I wanted to write about this. No, I think we'll leave it at that for now. Yeah, OneNote is not native on Linux, but you can use the web version, and then there's some Electron wrapped web version you can use, and both suck because they're really slow at searching. No notes on non-Google products. Your OneDrive has to be strictly used as reference. Whoa, really? Huh. Also, how do you learn about this? Is this during what's it called? Orientation? You know what programming language you're using? I think it's going to be mostly in Go, which I'm happy about. All I wanted was for it to not be C++. I just for some reason do not like C++. I've used it. I made a game in it a while ago. I coded a bunch of random little utility things and I just don't like it. So anything that's not C++ is fine with me. Where did the tab go? Here. Yeah, so I have some questions based on this, and I suppose we'll get there. Is there something else I wanted to write about this, though? Oh, yeah. I guess it's this. If it's a single node that handles it, what prevents this node from getting overloaded? I don't know. My guess is that it wouldn't be a single node handling it. Something called a keep node. Yeah, I used Evernote a while ago, ran into a couple of bugs that were kind of game breaking for me and then switched away. And that must have been like 2012 or 2013. So they've probably fixed the bug since then, but it doesn't matter because I left and never went back. But I've said this repeatedly that if I ever have to switch away from OneNote, it's going to be a gigantic pain just because of how much stuff is here and how much is cross-referenced. And as soon as you have, let's say like 90% of your notes in one spot and then 10% in another spot, even as those ratios change, and let's say they're 50-50, it still sucks where you search for something and you're like, is it not here? Did I never write it? Is it in the other notebook? So yeah, that's going to be a massive pain. Hey, possibly. Hey, okay. Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm learning about Kubernetes. It's going pretty slow right now. Granted, this is kind of how things work as I'm streaming myself learning, so I'm expecting this. But yeah, it's been good so far. Wow, Netties. Hey, Rena. Okay, so next, storage orchestration. Kubernetes allows you to automatically mount a storage system of your choice, such as local storages, public cloud providers, and more. Yeah. Okay, so this I think is fine. You can use local or cloud provided storage. I find any Udemy or online courses helpful in prep, or was it sufficient to read through documentation like this and move to small examples? When you say in prep, What do you mean here? Because prep is different for all the different things that I've been doing. I have, if you're talking about kind of the courses that I have on here, so the Godot game engine, I went through, how did I learn that? I think I went through their documentation and then just tinkered around, and that was totally fine. With Firebase, I think it was the same way. And yet with some other things, I've tried things like YouTube videos or getting like a collab with someone to help teach it to me. And so it's kind of any number of ways that I'll do this. So if there's a specific kind of prep you're talking about, yeah, feel free to ask. But I generally do not seek out paid resources. Is the position at Google more DevOps oriented, or Kubernetes is just part of the job tech stack? So I kind of mentioned this in the job hunt command or the today command. There's that same document in both of these, but I don't actually have a job at Google yet. So there's no offer letter again yet. And so I can't answer this question because I don't know the answer to the question. So what I'm doing right now, while it is work and prep for Google, it's not officially Google work. It's not like someone tasked me with this. This is just, oh, hey, I know the position involves Kubernetes, so let's go learn it. Personally advise against it. Well, there's one instructor on there who I hear is pretty good. This guy, man, what a great course he did. Well, why am I able to? Oh, because I own the course, because I made the course. Yeah. Okay. So this part I think is fine. Automated rollouts and rollbacks. You can describe the desired state for your deployed containers using Kubernetes, and it can change the actual state to the desired state at a controlled rate. For example, you can automate Kubernetes to create new containers for your deployment, remove existing ones, and adopt all their resources. Yeah, this is fine. Done by describing the desired state. So there's this concept that I heard called GitOps, which is pretty cool. So what I heard about this is that you declaratively describe what your infrastructure should look like, and you check this in to your Git repo. And pretty much every time you change that declarative description, your infrastructure will just be changed to look like this. Now, that on its own is not totally crazy, right? There are technologies out there like Terraform, which are meant to do this declarative infrastructure. Alternatively, you might hear this as like infra as code. So once you have a file that says, and I'm going to greatly simplify this, like I want one VM with, 2 gigabytes of RAM, and I want another VM with 4 gigabytes of RAM. Again, great simplification of this. That if you were to all of a sudden change this to be like, you know what, no, I want this to have 8 gigabytes of RAM, you check this in, you're just kind of good to go, and now all of a sudden your VM in the cloud has more RAM. And that's kind of it. That's again, greatly simplified. But that's sort of what they're talking about here, which is you just change your description of this and you'll get your new state. Sent a DM with more context. Okay, thank you, Richie. And by the way, if that DM was over Twitch, I'll just write this down. I'll check both spots. Yeah, so this is something that I think for most popular knowledge out there, probably YouTube's going to be good enough. Then there's this esoteric knowledge like, making NES ROMs. I think that's somewhat harder to cobble together from the free resources, even though they're pretty good out there. And I don't know, there's a bunch of other like kind of random things that I think are tougher, but it's like someone came up with this knowledge at first, so probably it's going to be out there. I haven't finished my own course. I don't think I've actually watched the whole thing from start to finish, but I had to watch all those videos as I was editing them, of course. I know you're kidding, but yeah. Show an error via the ID and say, of course it's an error, but never explain why. Oh boy. Yeah. You can provide Kubernetes with a cluster of nodes they can use to run containerized tasks. Tell it how much CPU and RAM each container needs. It can fit your containers onto your nodes to make the best use of your resources. Yeah. So this is Windy. Thank you for the raid. Hello, all you Windy viewers. We're learning Kubernetes today. So strap yourselves in and prepare for the cube. Yeah, so for those who don't know, Kubernetes is orchestration of containers. And when I say containers, I mean things like Docker containers. It's relatively technical, and I don't know what depth we're going to get into today, but I'm just taking notes like I normally do. But yeah, it's going well. How are you guys doing? So Kubernetes will figure out how best to pack your containers based on resource needs. So this kind of packing, this is something that you guys might have heard of in, let's say, like game development with sprite packing. So I'm going to draw some very high fidelity sprites here. You've got a sprite. This one's kind of a square, and then maybe you've got something that's more like a rectangle, and then you have a sprite sheet. And you need to figure out how can I fit these things over here into the sprite sheet in the best possible way. And so maybe this one, in order to fit, would need to be rotated. So this is kind of a simple example, right? You just, okay, cool, we use this whole column. Maybe that was our whole sprite sheet that we needed. That is what they're talking about here too, where you've got a machine that needs these computing resources and this amount of RAM, and we'll find the way to fit them best. Now, I don't know, this is another question I have, what kind of downtime is incurred by relocating containers across nodes? Is this on the order of seconds? Yeah. Hey, Tim. Use it on AWS before they first started support. Yeah. Yeah, so I've heard a bunch of things now from people that have said this is very complicated technology and that it started out nice. That was repeated probably by 3-4 different people today so far. And so it makes me think that either that's true or that it's true for the average user and that enterprises are different. Maybe they need that complexity. Because I generally think that products can take any number of manifestations with regards to complexity. One is that they just have complexity because they think people will want it, and another is because it's for a use case that maybe is for 10% of the people who use it. You can have zero downtime. You can set how many pods can be unavailable during a rollout. Oh, I see. So you basically just turn one off and turn the other one on and reroute them through DNS, let's say. That's interesting. Okay, and by the way, thank you for the answer. Yeah, so these are things hopefully I'll learn about and I can write in my notes with a like an official reference. Not that I don't trust you. You've helped me out a lot at Atomic Nibble, but I'd like to look into that some more. All right, self-healing. It restarts containers that fail, replaces containers, kills containers that don't respond, doesn't advertise them to clients until they're ready to serve. Yeah, I don't think we really need to write any words. Self-healing seems pretty self-explanatory. And then secret and configuration management lets you store and manage sensitive information like passwords, OAuth tokens. You can deploy and update secrets in application configuration without rebuilding your container images and without exposing secrets in your stack configuration. Yeah, I don't think we really need to write anything else for that either. So maybe we'll put all the self-explanatory ones at the top. Yeah. Hey, Dr. Morrow, am I swimming in money? I have not started the job yet. The today command covers a lot more of that. Thanks, then, Perry. I feel like it's a product that's useful for very large enterprises. Yeah, and that's kind of my feeling too. I asked in the team matching meeting, like, hey, where does this team land as their customers? And the answer was pretty much like, it's like any other scalability thing, you know, when people need it, that's when they look into it. And so if you think of cloud configuration and let's say just something like Terraform. So I ended up using Terraform, but I didn't use it completely as it was intended to be used because I migrated from a handmade infrastructure to a Terraform, I'll just say made infrastructure. And so I still had things that were handmade, and that's not how you're really supposed to do things with Terraform, despite that it can allow for that. So now let's say Botland got huge and I wanted to take it to the next level. I wanted to instantiate it in Europe and in Asia and in Australia. And then, yeah, having a bunch of Terraform files would be great. But that's not something I'd look into right off the bat. And so I wonder how many people are trying to use this when it doesn't fit. It's that whole, if you have a hammer, everything will start to look like a nail. Hey, Marco. It's a whole bottle of champagne. Okay. Is this a sincere comment from Ed Perry? Thank you, Timon. Yeah, Aztec. Yeah, so I think here's kind of what I think about this whole thing. Team matching was very interesting to me. So normally team matching does not exist. And actually this is a concept that people were talking about on Discord quite a lot of like, is this common in the US? And no, it's not common in the US. It's not common for many companies. It's got to be a company that I think has enough resources to be able to say like, well, we hired you. Now we're going to find a good fit for you and not necessarily benefit from hiring you for at least a month or something. So the reason why it was interesting is because they weren't interviews. I just got to talk to people who worked on these teams, and they might say something like, okay, here's Botland, here are the technical challenges we face, here's the roadmap that we're going to do. Does that sound good to you? And it might not. You know, you might be like, oh, God, game development. Like, I don't want to do that. And then cool, you don't have to do it. So that's why I thought it was so good. However, there was a time that it felt like apartment hunting to me. And the way I look at this is, you know, you go and look at 10 apartments, and then you try to think back and you think like, apartment number 4, was that the one that had the island in the kitchen? Or was that the one that they said that you need to fix something up here? You just, they all kind of blend together. And I only talked to 4 teams. And of those 4 teams, I thought 3 would be a good fit. So I started to run into analysis paralysis where I was like, well, how do I decide now between the teams? And I realized I have a new strategy for dealing with analysis paralysis in my life that I came up with maybe a month or 2 ago, which is make a decision within 10 seconds and commit to it. It sounds really dumb, but I think it's a good idea. I've done it twice now and I've been happy both times. So, I mean, really, that's the core of the problem is that you're analyzing things too much. So there's no amount of new information that I needed or talking to people. I just thought, you know what makes the most sense right now? Okay, great. Let's go with that. And awesome. So all of this was kind of to address that cloud configuration sounds like an interesting specialization. Yes, this is not something I would have thought I'd steer myself toward. And yet what I think is important to me out of a job is mostly the manager and the team. And I think the work kind of comes last. Ideally, it's not something I hate. And that's why I was trying to figure out like, okay, is it a coding language I'm happy with? Is it technology that I'm familiar with? Can I commiserate with the users of it? And all that's true for this. So cool. Awesome. Let's go with it. Hey, let me turn on this feed. Too hot. Yeah, so generation, if this works for you, I'd actually love to hear a follow-up because, like I said, this is something I came up with relatively recently. And I think that it's sort of like if you've ever heard when you flip a coin to make a decision, you know what decision you want while the coin is in the air. If that doesn't happen to you after you make that 10-second decision, then you'll never have come to a better conclusion. That's kind of how I see it. How long are we in the stream? So it's been about an hour. I'll probably be streaming for another like 2 to 4 hours, something like that. What's covered in cloud config? Is it like Ansible DevOps things? So it's sort of, whoop, man, that frequently has been happening lately where my mouse just goes berserk. So it's sort of secretive, and it's not because I'm trying to be secretive. It's because I haven't actually started on the team yet. So I don't know too much about it. I do know it's going to involve Kubernetes. I do know it's going to involve probably these other technologies to some extent, which I know nothing about these technologies. All I know is their names. So config connector, kept, and customized. You have any good resources for learning TypeScript? I went through just their guide that they have. Yeah, the handbook. So other than that, no, I unfortunately don't. I also never ended up using TypeScript after learning it. All right, so let's continue again with this. So what it is not, it's not a traditional all-inclusive platform as a service. Since it operates at the container level rather than at the hardware level, it provides some generally applicable features common to platform as a service offerings, such as deployment, scaling, load balancing, and lets users integrate their logging, monitoring, and alerting solutions. However, it's not monolithic, And these default solutions are optional and pluggable. It provides the building blocks for building developer platforms, but preserves user choice. Yeah, so I looked at the Wikipedia page a little bit, and they did talk about some of these things and how some of the add-ons that are now very common are things like monitoring and logging, and yeah, so basically the things that they just said over here. Now, one thing that I think is a little weird. Oh, this is a mandatory feature. Never mind. I was gonna say I thought that needed to be there. Hey, EJ. I started just directly on Kubernetes.io. Yeah. So the way I look at this is if I learn, let's say there are 100 things to learn and I learn 2 of them today, then awesome. That's 2 that I learned that I would not have known otherwise. So if this isn't necessarily the best way of going about this, like that's okay. I'm still new enough where I can probably benefit from even resources that aren't necessarily the best. Although this is the official site. I think you're learning about technology. Container technology will not go to waste. Yeah, that's the other thing that I was thinking about too. Is when I think about just how the timeline has been in physical machines to VMs to containers, I don't know what the next step could even be, but containers should be around for quite some time. This is like you run this command and it leaks your DNA. All right, does not limit the types of applications supported. Aims at, okay, this is like on a job interview when they say, "Hey, can you tell me your greatest weakness?" and you're like, "I care too much" or something. Saying that it does not limit the type of applications is something that it it does, but then phrased negatively so that it does not do that. I would have phrased this as like Kubernetes supports all types of applications. Anyway, aims to support an extremely diverse variety of workloads, including stateless, stateful, data. Yeah, so I know about this. If an application can run in the container, it should run great on Kubernetes. Yeah. I think the next step will be the providers will provide you with transparent services. You don't even have to bother with Terraform, Helm, etc. anymore. Yeah. And Zizep, so the answer is basically yes. That's the full answer. But I don't actually have an offer in hand yet. So I think the only ways, from what I understand, and I don't have a lot of insight into this process, but I think the only ways to not get the job at this point is to have tons of red flags. So if I were to start this stream and start like bad mouthing Google or saying how much I hate a particular thing or person, or that's probably a red flag. That could probably stop me from getting the job. But other than that, I think the answer is pretty much like should happen in a couple days. Is being a streamer a red flag? You know, I said, hey, so I stream on Twitch, and Twitch is kind of in direct competition with YouTube, right? At least with the live streaming component of it. I was like, is that going to be a problem? He's like, yeah, it probably shouldn't be. What do you dislike the most about Google? Well, let me tell you what Kubernetes doesn't do. All right, it doesn't limit the types of applications. It's not going to insult you in the middle of the night. All right, so it does not deploy source code and does not build your application. Continuous integration to okay, yeah, this is fine too. Does not provide application level services such as middleware, like message buses, data processing frameworks. Yeah, I think all this is pretty clear to me so far. It's probably good for them to say this so that you realize, oh, this isn't going to be your solution for everything. I feel like Ishay had this typed out before I finished answering. Probably shouldn't be streaming or probably shouldn't be a problem? Probably shouldn't be a problem. Sorry. Yeah, I did not make that clear. Yeah, I don't think streaming is going to be an issue. I did mention that typically what I do on stream is some kind of programming or tech work. I would almost certainly run this by whoever I'm working with or for. The other thing is that I have no real attachment to Twitch. Like I turned off subs, so it's not like I have a whole monetization, train with a bunch of momentum here. But I do have a contract with Twitch. So up until maybe like August or September of next year, it is the exclusive platform for me to stream on. And I'm fine with that. I've had no problems with Twitch lately, but I'm just saying I also if Google is like you have to switch to YouTube, I'd say, okay, sure, let's wait till August or September. Oh, if I were to stream on YouTube, I don't know if well, actually, I probably would use my personal channel, I guess. Do I know Ansible? Yeah. Yeah, I used Ansible quite a lot before completely ditching it for Terraform. And yeah. Okay. Does not dictate logging, monitoring, alerting. Does not provide nor mandate a configuration language or system. Provides a declarative API that may be targeted by arbitrary forms. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't actually know that. I wonder. I guess there's some layer above Kubernetes that people write their configuration in, and then that interfaces with Kubernetes API. Hey, Master. Show Google about your Bing Rewards pyramid scheme you got running. No, I don't know if that's going to be a problem. I like to call it multi-level marketing, by the way. Marquee level marketing. Does not provide nor adopt any comprehensive machine configuration, maintenance, management, or self-healing systems. Okay. And is not a mirror orchestration system. In fact, it eliminates the need for orchestration. Okay, this sounds interesting so far because I look at this as orchestration. So, yeah, what do they mean by this? The technical definition of orchestration is execution of a defined workflow. First do A, then B, then C. In contrast, it comprises a set of independent composable. Okay, I see. All right, but does anybody actually mean this when they say orchestration? In fact, if you just look at the Kubernetes Wikipedia article and search for orchestration, yeah, no, I'm not gonna, I don't, no. I reject this bullet point. This is a terminology bullet point. Yeah, so I don't care about that. Oh, nice, Memphis. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, I put a lot of time into that blog post. I want to do one more blog post on everything I learned in the last 5 years at being at a startup. And I started to write that, but I never finished. And I was, like I said, just a lazy bum the last couple of weeks. Played a lot of Path of Diablo. Okay, cool. So we covered this. Let's move on to Kubernetes components. Yeah. Everything I learned, I'd read that. Yeah, I have the outline for the post, but I don't know if I have enough written where I could finish that anytime soon. So I'll probably stop streaming today in around like I said, maybe like 3 hours. And then afterward, maybe I work on that blog post. Maybe I just sit around and do nothing. Not sure. Okay, when you deploy Kubernetes, you get a cluster. A Kubernetes cluster consists of a set of worker machines called nodes that run containerized application. Every cluster has at least one worker node. A group of nodes, at least one node per cluster is required. Excuse me. The worker nodes host the pods. So a pod represents a set of running containers in your cluster. A set of running containers in your cluster. But it's on a node, right? Can a pod span nodes? No, it can't. Okay, so I'm going to say in a node then. Pod cannot span nodes. Thank you guys for answering that. And let's just do some basic formatting here. Okay. Kubernetes in 100 seconds. So Poetrill, it's probably good, and I should probably watch it. So I'll write that down for later. But I don't like showing other people's copyrighted content on my stream. So I'll have to check it out later. Unfortunately, if it's something that tries to teach in a minute and a half, then I'll probably by that point have already learned whatever it has to teach. But still, could be worthwhile. So thank you for sharing. Okay, host the pods that are the components of the application workload. The control plane, okay, what's this? The container orchestration layer. But Kubernetes is not orchestration, remember that. It exposes the API and interfaces to define, deploy, and manage the life cycle of containers. Can I? No, I can't. I wanted to select this. Oh, you can just click it. Oh, neat. What does this plus do? Oh, cool. Wow. All right, well, we can link to any of these then. That's not merely orchestration? Okay, I guess that's a better thing to say. I shouldn't make jabs at it anyway. So we could do this. We could actually set these things up. Cluster Okay, that was dumb to search for because it's all over the place. Here's cluster and then node. We'll just scroll down to it because we already learned a lesson. Don't search for common things. Okay, so next up is control plane. That's here. Control plane. And what is this? The orchestration layer that exposes the API and interfaces to define, deploy, and manage the lifecycle of containers. It's composed of many different components, such as, but not restricted to, etcd, which is their daemon that shares configuration values, I think. Something like that. Kubernetes backing store, yeah. So, like I said, I read the Wikipedia article like 2 a.m. the other night, and so I know a tiny bit. Key value config store, okay. Yeah. Okay, so the orchestration layer that defines APIs and interfaces to define, deploy, hang on 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So define, deploy, and manage the lifecycle of containers. Okay, yeah, not bad. Let's close out all these other things since I'm not actually looking at them. So the control plane manages the worker nodes and the pods in a cluster. Manages the worker nodes and pods. So I guess I'll write that here too. This manages the worker nodes and pods in a cluster. In production environments, control plane usually runs across multiple computers, and a cluster usually runs multiple nodes. This usually runs across multiple computers. Okay. Thanks, Locust. Is the bottom picture gone? No, it's still there behind my head. So I like this. I want to also put a link to here. It's always in the back of his mind. Oh, get out. All right. Yeah, this is fine. This document outlines the various components you need to have a complete and working Kubernetes cluster. Here's the diagram of the cluster with all the components tied together. Okay, can we expand this? Not really. Okay, what's all this CM mean? CM, CCM? Is that Cloud Controller Manager? Control plane component that integrates Kubernetes with third-party cloud. Yeah, probably it's that. And then CM is probably Controller Manager. Control plane component that runs. All right, well, if we're gonna include this, let's just link to the glossary over here. Oh. Neat. Neat. Basically handles applying desired state. If the plane is down, the cluster can still accept traffic, but state changes go unnoticed. So it won't notice if a node is offline and will still send traffic to it. Okay, I'll just copy paste what you said. Can you fall to the bed backwards where you sit or stand? No, I'd hit my head and probably die. It's slightly farther back than you may think. Did I start the job? No, not yet. I've got the today command kind of talks about this a little bit. Usually legends on the side of diagrams. Did I miss it in this? Oh, you read from right, left to right though. Why'd they put this all the way on the right? All right, good call though. So API, sked. What could that possibly mean? All right, so what is it? All this is in the control plane, which is outside of where nodes are going to be running your application. Okay, so that's probably, I think that's the important part here. Reference, picture reference. Yeah. Essentially, the control plane is essentially everything that's not your application, right? Yeah. Yep. So you could, it's just not safe. That's correct. Just like how I could fly for a couple of seconds. Am I learning DevOps stuff? I'm just learning Kubernetes. So the today command kind of talks about everything that I'm I'm doing this for. But the short story is for the last, well, like sort of 2 months of the stream, a lot of what wow, it's like all gone now. Well, anyway, it was interview prep. And then I did the interviews and I pretty much got a job. And now we're learning for that job. Okay, so plane components. Control planes components make global decisions about the cluster, for example, scheduling, as well as detecting and responding to cluster events. For example, starting up a new pod when a deployment's replicas field is unsatisfied. Okay, sounds fine. Control plane components can be run on any machine in the cluster. However, for simplicity, setup scripts typically start all control plane components on the same machine and do not run user containers on this machine. While it could technically run on the same machine as with pods and nodes, with your application's pods, that's not typical. Yeah, I think that makes sense too. It probably makes monitoring easier because your control plane you probably want to monitor as well and make sure that it's healthy. And if you see that the CPU is spiking on that, you don't want to wonder that it's your application doing that, I guess. I don't know what the monitoring even looks like yet, so I guess we'll have to see. Hey, Gleus. So Kube API server. The API server is a component of the Kubernetes control plane that exposes the Kubernetes API. The API server is the front end for the Kubernetes control plane. The main implementation of it is Kube API server. Now they say main implementation of it. Is this Google's implementation? It might be, and that also would imply that there are other implementations of it. I guess anything that's open source could have multiple implementations. If you go HA, you'll put it in a cluster too. Oh, to make sure that the control plane itself doesn't have a single point of failure. Yeah. Okay. Let's see if this is in the terms. API server. Component of Kubernetes control plane that exposes the Kubernetes API. API server is the front end for the Kubernetes control plane. Okay. I guess we'll write this down next. This is the front end for the control plane that exposes the Kubernetes API. Yeah, I guess that's fine. The main implementation is this. We should probably write that down too. Azure has AKS. That gets into hooking into providers, right? So this cloud provider API is going to be different from the API server. The API server apparently talks to the cloud controller manager, which then talks to the cloud provider API. Right, interesting. If you get a managed K8S service, everything in the control plane is hidden and done for you. Yeah, I see. Yeah, interesting. Because then at that point, I guess you are able to, as a consumer of this, much more easily manage everything. Okay. Yeah, these pieces are starting to come together a little bit. So etcd, consistent and highly available key value store. Yeah, this we should definitely write down. Do they have their own? Yep, they do. Okay, let's write that down. Hey, Crow. And hey, Selma. So this is the consistent key value store. Now I should write it this way. Key value store consistent across all nodes in the cluster. Is that what? All cluster data? Should have a backup plan for those data? For those data? Is that UK English? Because in America we say that data. Consistent across the cluster. So updating this does not require rebuilding images or redeploying. Containers will simply see the updated values. Did I start work? No, not yet. The today command talks a little bit more about it. Honestly, this doc isn't huge. It's maybe like 2 paragraphs at the top that most people wouldn't have read yet. No, even just the 1 paragraph. Yeah, just the first one. So yeah, short story. I'm waiting for an offer. It should be today or tomorrow. Then I imagine there's going to be a little bit of just kind of like contractual back and forth, which may or may not happen. And then, yeah, figuring out a start date. So if I had to guess, probably going to be starting on the 12th. Yeah. I already have offers from Microsoft and Amazon. No, Microsoft pretty much just ghosted me. And Amazon, I sent them an email saying that I chose Google. So at this point, I don't have any offers, I guess. And should hear back from Google soon. If your Kubernetes cluster uses etcd as its backing store, make sure you have a backup plan. So what do they say for this? All the objects are stored on etcd. Periodically backing up etcd cluster data is important to recover Kubernetes clusters, such as losing all master nodes. Snapshot file contains all of the states and critical information. In order to keep it safe, encrypt the snapshot files. Backing up can be accomplished in 2 ways: built-in snapshot and volume snapshot. Snapshot may either be taken from a live member. Where does this go, though? Because this is already running in the control plane. Right? Yeah. Oh, probably just to some storage, probably via the Cloud Controller Manager into there. So there's a way to take it, and then you're responsible for getting this out of the control plane? Mm. Oh, interesting. Also, scaling up etcd clusters increase availability by trading off performance. Scaling does not increase the performance nor capability. A general rule is not to scale it up or down. Do not configure any auto-scaling groups. Highly recommended to always run a static 5-member etcd cluster at any officially supported scale. 5-member cluster. So I know that this uses Raft internally. Raft requires a minimum of 3 member nodes. And so they suggest 5 because for consensus you need to have the majority, and to have the majority you need an odd number, and the next number bigger than 3, next odd number bigger than 3 is 5. So I guess that's why they reasonable scaling is upgraded 3-member cluster to a 5-member one. Okay, but I guess they're doing this just for availability. What do they mean by 5-member? So the way this works is this is just a key value store. So you have something like, I don't know, let's say you were storing botland information on this. So you might say something like salvage pack cost in US dollars, and you might say like 5. And then you might have something else like, I don't know, experience multiplier. And that's it. It's just storing some keys and some values, right? So the way that this works is via a consensus algorithm, which they said that they use Raft. And there's a whole lot to how this works. But in general, for you to, they don't have a picture. All right, well, that's what I was trying to show. Maybe this one will have it. No. But anyway, for you to have consensus means the majority agrees on something. And so you might have, node 1 thinks that this number is 4, and node 2 and 3 both think that they're 5. So when you query this thing, there's going to be typically some primary node you reach out to that knows the value, and it knows it by seeing what other ones agree on. So anyway, by having 5 in this system, it's just that you have something like this. So the majority still agree that the answer should be 5 across those 5 nodes. Is this my last stream? I don't think I'll ever know when my last stream is. This might help. Yeah. So this is the interactive. I've never used this before, so I don't know exactly how to. Okay, yeah, here's how we could do this. There's some way you could give it a value, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how you do this exactly. Say Raft 3 times and Rhyme appears. Hey, Rhyme. Okay, let's keep going. All right, next up is a cube scheduler. Control plane component that watches for newly created pods with no assigned node and selects a node for them to run on. All right, is this just an example of a general scheduler? Yes. Yes, it is. But they do not have a link directly to scheduler here. They just have it for cube scheduler. So we'll just link to that. E.g. cube scheduler. Well, really just a link to this, I guess. So we'll just make the whole thing bold. So this is a control plane component which determines the node to run new pods on. Yeah, I like it better this way, I think. Yeah, they just mean 5 machines essentially. The way that I think there's a tiny bit more to this that we haven't talked about yet, but I think that anything you set here in the control plane will make it to all of your nodes automatically. So let's say in my example, you had some value of like name Adam and you update it to be this. I think that you update it here, then it replicates within the whatever forms a consensus in your control plane, so 3 or 5 or 7 machines, whatever you have. And then I think it actually does make it out to all of these things. Yeah, spoiler alert. I'm not positive that that's what happens, but I think so. That's not what happens? Okay. Yeah, so then it is not a spoiler. We will find out about what actually happens. So then I guess when they need a configuration value, they query it? I don't know. I'll just write that down as a question that I have for now. When you update something in etcd, how do your container/pods find out about it? Do they have to pull for it? Are they told immediately? Yeah. So factors taken into account include individual and collective resource requirements, hardware-software policy constraints, affinity, anti-affinity, data locality. Okay, yeah, all this makes sense. So in order, you pretty much at some point will just say, hey, I want a new pod. And it's the cube scheduler is going to be like, all right, well, we got space here, we got space here, and maybe they need to rearrange some things. They're pulled when they're read, not broadcast. Okay. This is apparently what happens. They're not broadcast. All right. Thank you. Yeah, so what I assume the scheduler is going to do is, let's say you had these kind of like, I'm gonna draw a terrible picture. This is my ASCII art bucket. It doesn't really fit. Okay, great. There's that. So this can fit, let's say, 4 units in it. So if you had something taking, this is dumb. This is dumb. Just never mind that I even started to draw anything. Hey, Redman. pull a pod envar from etc config, you need to restart the pod to get new values. Oh yeah, I see. As opposed to just reading it directly from the config. No more green screen. Yeah, we had guests a couple of weeks ago, and I needed to take the green screen out so that this room looked like a room again, and I just didn't feel like putting it back up. I've got the stand here. Not that this whoops, on my desk. And these very powerful clips for the actual fabric. But yeah, it's huge. Very, very big, that green screen. So then controller manager runs controller processes. What is this? A control loop that watches the shared state of the cluster through the API server and makes changes attempting to move the current state toward the desired state. I see. So that's the controller manager. Do we have something written for that? Nope. They don't. They just link directly to Cube controller manager. Okay, fine. We'll write it that way, I suppose. Except that we want to link to... Oh, no, they don't even do that. Oh, fine. Controller manager, e.g. Cube controller manager. All right, runs controller processes. Controller processes. In order for this to make any sense, we need to... Oh no, I forgot. What do we need to do to make this make sense? Yeah, we need to start with controller, I guess. Which I'm pretty sure... Oh nice, we do have that. There. Actually, my workouts lately have consisted solely of Ring Fit, and I went for a run. But I used to just go to the gym, and now I refuse to go to the gym. I feel, probably said this last time, but of all the ways to die in this world, going to the gym during a pandemic is probably the dumbest way. So I'm not going to do that. Is this more of a DevOps role? I am not totally sure. Also, it's kind of weird to say, like, that it might be a DevOps role regardless. I'm going to be a developer in that role. So I'm not sure whether for me it's going to feel more like dev or DevOps. Probably more like dev. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a weird question to answer. So in Kubernetes, controllers are control loops that watch the state of your cluster and make or request changes where needed. Each controller tries to move the current cluster state closer to the desired state. I wonder why there are multiple controllers. Okay, so how do we say this? Control loops that try to shift the current state toward the desired state via the API server. Will we get to see me making commits on the Kubernetes repo? I highly doubt that I'll be able to do work relevant tasks while streaming. This is maybe the one exception because I have not been given an offer yet, and I'm only looking at public things, and I don't have to worry about representing the company. Now, granted, I'm not doing anything like terribly wrong, right? I poked fun at a little bit of the documentation, but that's it. But in the future, I probably have to be pretty careful. In fact, you guys probably know better than I do whether you've seen Google employees streaming on Twitch in an official capacity. Just seeing the effects. Oh, I see what you're saying. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. I think, from what I understand, what I'm going to be doing involves Kubernetes, but is not Kubernetes. Okay, so I've got this written down. And that's what led us to this. We wrote this one down, right? Yeah. So control plane component that runs controller processes. Okay. Logically, each controller is a separate process, but to reduce complexity, they're all compiled into a single binary and run in a single process. Okay, so logically, these are all separate processes, but to reduce complexity, they're all run in a single process. And I guess the reason for doing this is that if they ever needed to split them out or anything needed to scale differently from a different one, from another controller, that they could do that easily. And there must just not have been a need yet. These controllers include node controller, responsible for noticing and responding when nodes go down. Replication controller, responsible for maintaining the correct number of pods for every replication controller object. So this must be what replica sets are for, which I did not understand before, and now I think they make more sense. Let me read about this. Maintain a stable set of replica pods running at any given time. Guarantee that, yep, that makes sense now. Neat. So this is what lets you move things quickly. If you want a pod somewhere else, you pretty much say, oh, we'll just have 3 pods running kind of in the background. And then whenever we end up needing one of those, cool, it's just there. This is also probably how they get good scalability, is by saying at any point, have an extra 2 replica pods, or whatever your traffic extrapolation might require. Kubernetes. Okay, that's interesting for sure. Yeah, and I want to write this down. So not a question. Want to make sure to write this down when I get to it. Replica, what are they called? Replica sets? Replica sets are for availability and scalability. Well, I'll say probably for now since I'm not totally sure. Populates endpoint objects, joins services and pods. We never covered the word service, did we? No, we didn't. Might as well write that down on here. An abstract way to expose an application running on a set of pods as a network service. Set of pods targeted by a service is usually determined by a selector. So I read about that on the Wikipedia article. If more pods are added or removed, the set of pods matching the selector will change. Service makes sure that network traffic can be directed to the current state of pods. Okay. This isn't super clear to me yet, but I suppose we'll write this down anyway. Service. Oops, that was supposed to say bold. An abstract way to expose an application running on a set of pods. An abstract way to expose a running application on a set of pods as a network service. Is this a term now? Kind of like a port. Exposed deployment. I see. So this is really the operative word here. Okay. Since you're making this available on the network. Yeah. Something wants to talk to a service that queries the DNS. This use of traffic can be routed to nodes that are running the service, add new pods. Okay. I'll just copy paste that here for now. By the way, Atomic Nibble, if you have any problem with me copy pasting what you've written here, please do let me know. I'll remove it. I think we've talked about this before. And as of yet, no one's ever said they have a problem. So, totally happy to remove it if they do. So the actual specific controllers that are in here are maybe not worth writing about. And thank you, Atomic Nibble. They are maybe not worth writing about. Yeah. I guess for more information, about specific controller processes. There's a small blurb here. Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm happy with that. Yeah, so this is definitely quite a lot of information so far, but this is exactly what I wanted to learn about. And we're getting toward the end of this. We're not there yet though. Hooey. All right. So, Cloud Controller Manager. That's what's next. This is what interfaces with the cloud platform, I'm guessing. Oh yeah, I never talked. Someone else mentioned this too. Will your position be remote or permanently remote? So the answer that I have for now is I don't know. Every company near me is remote for now, and likely for the next 6 to 9 months. So all I know for sure is it is not starting as an in-person job. And if I had to guess, the offices are probably like dimly open. As in, if you wanted to go in and maybe you had some like special request or something, you could fulfill it. But I doubt anyone's there working. I would not want to go into the office for the same reason I don't want to go into the gym right now. I don't I don't think it's a good idea. But at some point, and this is what I feel is going to be tough about transitioning out of this work remote world, is that some people benefit from working from home and they might feel pressure from their coworkers who are going into work that, oh, now they have to be there too. And some of this has to do with like politics and perception, and I don't mean politics as in world politics. I mean politics as office politics. Basically something like, show up before your lead and leave after them, that sort of thing. And this is not, I'm not saying this is what Google does or anything. Some cultures, some companies have this mentality of that's important. And so now imagine if there are 8 people in a meeting who are there in person and there are 2 people who are remote. It's going to feel like, oh, we gotta call in for the remote people. Okay, let's set this up, and it's kind of a hassle. So anyway, that's what makes me feel like there's going to be pressure, not explicit pressure, but pressure for people to go back into work once it's allowed for some people. You go crazy if you didn't go to the office occasionally? Go to the gym every day though? Yeah, this is something that, I was talking to some people and they said like working remote, that should be great for you. That's what I did for the last 5 years. Technically, I was streaming on Twitch. I was working on Botland. I was working on Adam Learns. However, I had Twitch. So for no even like 2 second period of the day, could I not just like look over and say hey to people, or read what people were saying? That's a pretty high level of interactivity that I would not have at a traditional job. And so working remote, you don't get to see the people you're working with necessarily unless you have a meeting. There's not that same level of contact. There's not that same understanding that, oh, if I went to the next room, I could talk to somebody. So I don't know what it's going to be like for me, but really 6 to 10 months or something, that's not long enough for me to really care. Should be fine for that amount of time. There you go, Deke. You do daily stand-ups. Yeah, this is another thing that I've heard is for new employees, it's hard to build that rapport with your coworkers, which I'm about to find out firsthand. And so I have an idea for this, which is to schedule a meeting with everybody on the team that is like 30% for work. So they can't feel like this has no value. But the goal would be to get to know people and just find out like, hey, what do you do? Can I talk to you about this sort of thing? Do we have anything in common? All of that stuff. So yeah, I expect that's going to be pretty difficult to navigate at first. And then eventually it just won't even matter. I mean, you got to move forward one way or another. Okay, so Cloud Controller Manager is this that puts in cloud-specific control logic. Lets you link your cluster into your cloud provider's API, separates out the components that interact with the cloud platform from components that interact with your cluster. Okay, the main point of contact for the cloud platform that you're running on, e.g. to provision new nodes, store things, store data, etc. Cloud platform. Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah. I'm going in as L5. I don't think I shared the level after I thought maybe it's a bad idea to share the level. So I did a while ago and then stopped. So I'm currently in the I'm not sharing it phase. So I'm sorry, but I'm not going to answer that question for now. I like to work from home 1 to 2 days per week. Yeah, I think being 100% at home without Twitch, I think it would be very difficult. And I wonder how Twitch as a viewer would feel for me. You guys are living it right now, right? You could tell me, but I don't know what it's going to be like for me. And I know for sure that I'd go crazy if I had no social contact during the day. So I definitely need to balance that. Yeah, so I feel like I should say, yes, I got a job at Google in quotes. There's no offer yet, and it should be today or tomorrow. So that's what I'm waiting for.
These pictures should match.
Oh man, that was loud. Whenever I say the word Google, my phone thinks, "Oh, it's time for me to shine." Yeah, okay. Thanks, VRB. And nice, congrats to you too. 4 years of remote here, it's fine. It'll affect everybody differently, though. I'm sure there's someone out there who just wants remote work because they don't want to talk to people. Then there are people out there who want remote work for not having a commute. And yeah, I think it's not a choice so much for me. I don't get the choice to go into the office. That's totally fine. Like I said, I'm okay with that for some amount of time. But then once I have the choice, I'm not sure which one I would prefer. So we'll find out. Yeah. Okay. So once you link your cluster to cloud provider's API, separates out the components. So we read that from the definition. It only runs controllers that are specific to your cloud provider. If you're running Kubernetes on your own premises or in a learning environment inside your own PC, it does not have a cloud controller manager. Yeah, so I guess we can write that this is optional. Yeah. As with Kube Controller Manager, the Cloud Controller Manager combines several logically independent... Did I write that down? Yes, I did. Logically independent control loops into a single binary. Okay, I'll write that down too. Just like with the Controller Manager. This runs several controllers in a single process. So this and this and this, yeah. So you can... I think I'll just leave this as to provision new nodes, store data, etc. Because I'm pretty sure those are the things that are reasonable. Every day with clients doing trainings in architecture. Yeah, I think for me that social aspect is important. Also, what's important to me is having as small a commute as possible. And there's no way you could possibly beat a commute of like just wake up in one room and move to another room, you know? that's the fastest commute you could have. I guess if you slept at your computer, it could be faster. But yeah, I would not ever want a job where it's like an hour-long commute or something. I think the job would have to be way beyond a dream job for me to put up with that. And I know that's perhaps a very privileged thing to say, but like, yeah, I have limits to how long I want to spend in a car. In our cluster, we don't really store anything important. In Etsy, everything could be restored from config as is, just cluster config data. Should not be used as application data store. Well, what I was thinking about was more along the lines of, they said there are a couple of ways you can take etcd snapshots, and they said that there's a volume snapshot and there's a built-in snapshot. But either one of these, maybe volume snapshot is the one that you can export directly to your cloud. So like if I'm on Amazon, I could just put it in S3, let's say. So I assume that for this to even be possible, it's got to go through your cloud controller manager. I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at here, or if it's like, I assume you were focusing on the word store data. You don't think they're common? I can't say how common they are, but for sure they made it a link on this. Although I don't know where that is anymore. Uh, maybe here. Yeah, this. They've got a whole page on backing up the cluster. Oh, that's not exactly what they meant, apparently. Oh, interesting. What they meant is if you have it on something like EBS, that you could take a snapshot of EBS, which is going to capture everything, and then maybe your cloud platform can encrypt it for you. Okay, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, okay. Okay, so then let's delete this. Yeah, let's just delete that. Or I'll say or load balancers here. Yeah. So we've covered everything in the control plane. Okay. Now we move on to node components. And the node components in this picture are going to just be these two, I think. Are there only two here? Well, there's also the container runtime, but it's kind of obvious. But yeah, let's read about this now. So node components run on every node. So these are control plane components. And then we have node components. These run on every node. Copy a link to this. So kubelet. It's just a tiny cube. An agent that runs on each node in the cluster and makes sure the containers are running in a pod. Containers have to run in a pod? I guess a pod could just be size 1. The kubelet takes a set of pod specs that are provided through various mechanisms and ensures the container described in those pod specs are running and healthy. Kubelet, I think I said kubelet, reminding me of Romeo and Juliet. The kubelet doesn't manage containers which were not created by Kubernetes. Okay, this one I think is a little bit harder for me to sum up because I don't know what this means. It makes sure the containers are running in a pod. Yeah. What Kubernetes need to run? Does it require an underlying OS or can it straight run on the hypervisor? So this is what the third item is here, the container runtime. And that's based on what kind of containers you're running. So in general, you're not running like a fully fledged operating system. Typically, this is some very small operating system. Like you might have heard of something like, whoops. Might have heard of something like Alpine Linux. And so Alpine Linux is intended to be a very tiny Linux package, and that's going to be in your container. And then in order to run this, there's going to be probably some like Linux variant that can do virtualization of containers. Tell the controller manager that you want to run that application. Controller manager with a scheduler and a scoring system will find the best kubelet. Kubelet. The containers are running and healthy. Maybe that's literally all it really means is that they're healthy. And that it'll report what's running. I it's fair to say that. It's definitely fair to say this because it's taken right from the documentation. Yeah, an API agent receives and broadcasts events within your cluster. Okay. Hey, bot. So It's essentially just the point of contact for the control plane. You know, Andy, a friend of mine was in the stream the day that you said this one time, and then he started pointing out other people who we both know who have adopted this mindset. And I was thinking about this too. This has happened in other realms of my life that are not very important, like Smash. There was a guy I played Smash Bros. With a long time ago, and he wasn't very good. And because I don't think he owned the game or something, but he had fun playing, and we played together. And I like never ever. I don't think I trash talked him. I don't think I've rubbed it in. And then he got the next game in the series. He got Brawl, and he played a ton. And then he started beating me at the game, and he like really rubbed it in. It was like the opposite of how things were going before. I was like, what is going on right now? It was so bizarre because I thought we were just playing as friends, but I think in his mindset, his point of view was like, I gotta beat this guy. Very bizarre. Anyway, my friend reminded me of that, and then kind of what you had said, and I wonder if there's something I'm doing that's like a call to arms for people, and I want to find out if that's good or bad, if I should stop that. Yeah, for anyone who wants to hear that story that M. Perry's talking about, I should probably change that so that it mentions the year. He was giving me a bottle of cider for so long, I know. I just didn't have the opportunity. But it's like, we might have never found out about this. Alright, so this is what I wanted to find out, if this differentiates from the cubulet. Oh my god, I cannot stop saying that, like Capulet. Cubelet. It's probably better to pronounce it like this, as just blit. Cubelet. Yeah, there. Just keep saying that. Cubone. Kube proxy is a network proxy that runs on each node, implementing part of the Kubernetes service concept. It maintains network rules. These rules allow network communication to your pods from network sessions inside or outside of your cluster. Use the operating system packet filtering layer if there is one and it's available. Otherwise, it forwards the traffic itself. That is pretty interesting, but also slightly hard to talk about, I think. So, kube proxy. Let's write this down. Yeah, I was able to get the sub button disabled. Yep. In short for Andy, yes, it's terrible. I don't know. It can be a motivating mindset to some extent. Do you know if your workstation has height adjustable tables that allow you to work while standing? I have no idea what it's going to look like at Google, because I'm not even going to be at Google for like half a year at least. Yeah. We have nodes communicating with the control panel. Yeah. And thank you, Alex. Just so sad you can't add me, Janie. And when do I expect to start? I mean, I still have to get the offer, but my expectation is going to be like October 12th, thereabouts. It has to be a Monday, from what I was told. So that means that it has to be either this Monday, which I don't think will happen, the 12th or the 19th. So I don't want to start any later than the 19th. I've taken quite a long break. Yeah. Oh yeah. I meant physically at Google. Yeah. Sorry, the context of that was, do I know what my workstation's going to be? Okay, a network proxy implementing the... Okay. Network proxy that, I just still bold, implements part of the Kubernetes service concept. I want to write more about this. It maintains network rules. Does it say this even in this definition? Yeah. That allows network communication to pods from network sessions inside or outside the cluster for traffic both inside and outside of the cluster. I'll say either or. Well, no, that's bad. Inside or outside of the cluster. That's fine, that's better. And either via the operating system's I'll say like network primitives itself, or its own forwarding rules. Yeah. You can give bits, but I set the minimum to the largest minimum possible. So only one person has cheered since I turned off subs. That bold colon. Fine. There, Granny Sith. And hey, Sloth. I'm not in California. I'm in Washington. Although, actually, there were some days where I woke up in the last couple of weeks and it was just yellow inside. And it was the same thing yesterday. I looked at the air quality and it was... Let me see if I can show you guys this. Air quality index. Maps and data. This is... How do I... Man, I just want to show you guys this. Washington State. Go to interactive map. Yeah, here we go. I'm gonna wait for this to load, just so that it doesn't point out exactly where I live. It's not gonna load. Okay. Well, I just wanted to show you guys something. But this thing is trying its hardest to make sure that I can't show you. Aha. Come on, load. Why is... Fine. Well, whatever. Here's what did load. This is not a very easy to read map because the other one won't open. But, yeah, so this is Washington State, and I'm roughly here. So you can see that all the really bad air is down here. But a couple weeks ago, Oregon was like the worst color. It was purple or something, which was hazardous, and a lot of that blew into Washington as well. Wow, Raimu. Thank you very much for the bits. It's very nice of you. And yeah, Maple, I'm kind of sad about this too. And this is where I don't know. I still want to find a way to connect with you guys and to make content, and it's going to be tough due to just time constraints and also due to format. I mean, if I want to do a 40-hour long project, that's very different doing it over 1 week than over 10 weeks. Like, I can still have 40 hours over 10 weeks, but I don't know if you guys want to see 4 hours every Saturday. I don't know. Yeah, HV, thank you. I haven't been given the offer yet, though. Yeah, it was purple where you're at. Yeah. And that's at the point where it's like, you don't even want to step outside. That is tough. Can I explain how I process my thoughts? I think you'd have to be more specific for this. Because I don't know how to... I mean, this is basically sort of like asking, how does your brain work? Which I don't know how to answer that question. So if you have something more specific here, I could probably answer. I know what you're talking about, Maple. But yeah, thank you, Raimo. I really do appreciate it. Very nice of you. Why things were done when it's just a few hours per week. Yeah, that's true. I do think that's true. And I'm sure I will have something I want to work on in my free time. But I don't think that's going to happen at first. I think the first 6 months are going to be such a just deluge of learning that I'm just going to kind of be paralyzed from streaming. That's my guess. Who knows if that's how it works out. It could be that, oh, hey, now I've got to just go work on projects in Kubernetes or something. And cool, let me just do that. So I wrote this down. I wrote both of these down. I don't think they're ultra clear to me yet. But let's see. The last one here is this. The container runtime. I don't think it's worth writing that down. And then add-ons. Use Kubernetes resources to implement cluster features. Because these are providing cluster level features, namespace resources for add-ons belong within the kube system namespace. Alright, so DNS. This is strange wording. While all the other ones aren't strictly required, all clusters should have this. Not must have. the wording beforehand makes it sound like it is required, and the wording over here is that they should have it. It's a mandatory feature. I don't remember the whole IETF should, shall, must. Shall and will. Shall and must as synonymous terms, and should as denoting flexible requirement. Yeah, it doesn't sound all that flexible when they use the word mandatory. Hey, Smooth Dog. I don't think I'm going to be working on Kubernetes. I think I'm going to be working on something that involves Kubernetes. The today command talks a little bit more about this in that first paragraph in the job search doc. Your productivity went up when my stream went down? You know, honestly, Ultramark, I bet if you didn't chat in here, your productivity probably wouldn't change too much. But by chatting, you know that I might respond to you or that there might be something else you want to add to. Whenever I'm in like stealth mode in someone's stream, I find that it's much easier to focus than if I even say, hey. This part is important, especially because with persistent containers like databases, you really need the DNS. Yeah, it sounds like I will always have this. It's just strange wording that they don't necessarily require it. How did I decide it was a good fit if it's too secretive to know much about? I was talking about a little bit about this earlier. There were 4 teams I talked to, and 3 sounded good to me. And by the way, the one that didn't sound good was very performance focused. So it was like reduce the latency of this and increase the speed of this thing, and that's what I mean by performance, not like career performance. This does not sound interesting to me at all because I feel like every time you hit a goal, the goal just changes. So if it was like, it's like racing, you know, you complete it in 1 minute and 58 seconds. Okay, now aim for 1 minute and 55 seconds. And then you just keep lowering and lowering it until, you know, you're talking about like nanoseconds here. And that didn't sound interesting to me. So of the 3 that sounded good to me, I would have been happy with any of them. And I just wanted to move forward with one of them. So this one sounds like it's a good fit. Manager sounded really good. Team sounds good, but I only hear what the manager said about the team. I didn't actually meet any of them yet. What do you think of the new roof? It's actually still not totally done yet. While my friend was visiting, we woke up to hammering on the wall for the siding being put up again. Where am I at then? I'm waiting for the offer. That's what's going on right now. If you come from a racing mindset, performance seems to be a lot of fun. I think performance requires a certain kind of mindset that I don't necessarily have. There are a few things in my life that I've wanted to sort of refine to that level of performance, and it's not coding. So yeah, that just does not sound like for me. It was started and finished. It's not just the roofing work that was being done, but yeah, I don't know why this is stretched out for so long. How old am I? Check out the Adam's age command. So, sorry, I never answered your question, Salman. How am I organized? So, first of all, from a stream perspective, there are probably some people watching this like, wait a second, this is supposed to be a stream about learning Kubernetes. He covered like 2 things in the last 20 minutes or something. And yes, that tends to happen. So I think having that split is actually helpful because it serves as a break to some extent, although it still takes energy. I'm still talking. But being organized was a result of about maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I found that I was a little bit scatterbrained, and so I just started writing down everything. And this helped a lot because, and you'll see this in my notes a lot of times, if we go to the to-do archive, for example, if I'm ever like, hey, what did we do when it came to, I don't know, payment systems? I could look through some of this and piece together what I was thinking thanks to these notes that I have. And so I found it very helpful for me. And once I found it helpful, I just kept doing it. I think it's kind of in the same way that you can be turned away from doing things that might have been helpful just because you had some resistance at first. So as a dumb example, we have an Amazon Echo and you can give it commands to control the lights. And that was working totally fine. And all of a sudden lately it's broken. I'm worried that if it stays broken for long enough that we'll just stop using it that way because we'll have gotten used to it being broken. I chose Google, Magic Guinea Pig. And yeah, the today command talks a little bit more about it. I try to keep this up to date. I did update this today. I also updated the FAQ today. The FAQ now has the second question on here. What happened to the show? Why aren't there new courses? So I talked about how I started looking for a full-time job. Courses took a very long time to do. All right, yeah, let's finish up at least these things. So I guess we'll talk about add-ons. I don't think add-ons as a term is very important, but I guess knowing that DNS is mandatory. Web UI. No, maybe I don't want to write these down anyway. So next up is apparently to learn about all of these things. What does this link to? Yeah, we start to get into more of the nitty-gritty here. Excuse me. We should probably learn about this stuff. But here in concepts, they then get to the API and then working with objects. So how about this? Let's duplicate this tab. And then let's go to here and see what this is supposed to talk about. Understanding them. Did they get to understanding nodes? I don't know what I should cover next necessarily. I know there's a what's next section, but also there's a table of contents. Which one do I treat as the better what's next? Well, where does this fit in? Is this in cluster architecture? It is. So we'll probably get there. Yeah, so maybe we'll just work our way right down the list. Yeah, okay, let's do that. So the Kubernetes API, the core of the control plane is the API server. It exposes an HTTP API that lets end users. It's weird. Different parts of your cluster and external components communicate with one another. Kubernetes API lets you query and manipulate the state of objects in the Kubernetes API, pods, namespaces, config maps. Most operations can be performed through the kubectl command line interface or other command line tools such as kubeadm. That's like my name. In turn, use the API. However, you can also access it directly. Okay, yeah, makes sense. Where did I not even write down the API server? No, I did. So what's this main implementation? This is the implementation of the server itself. So I want to write, oops. The API itself is a REST API, i.e. it's over HTTP. But there are different interfaces for it. Where did it say? There it is. Yeah. Yeah, okay. There are different popular interfaces like this kubectl and kubeadmin. Okay. Open API specification. Complete ones are documented using OpenAPI. So we can search through here. What? Oh, I see. Oh, I don't care. Okay, fine. Yeah, this would matter more if I'm going to actually do something today with it. I don't think I am. I'm actually also not totally sure what this journey should necessarily be. The way I've been doing this now is just by going through the table of contents. There are still quite a lot of things on here. And I imagine this would take another at least probably like 8 to 16 hours. But I had other things I wanted to learn completely, like config connector, and I don't even know what these are. So I don't know if it's better to go with breadth right now and just get an understanding of what all these things are. What is this? Kubernetes add-on that allows you to manage Google Cloud resources through Kubernetes. So this is an add-on and not a cloud controller manager, or are cloud controller managers add-ons? Did they mention cloud? No, I don't. I'll write that down for after, Ultramark. Thank you. Config connector allows it to create and manage resources. They don't say cloud config controller on here, although it could be. Yeah, okay. And then what's kept? Kept is an OSS tool for building declarative workflows on top of resource configuration. It's Git and YAML architecture means it just works. How is this? What does this do on top of regular Kubernetes, I wonder? Because I already thought there were declarative workflows. FAQ. What does it provide that Git clone doesn't? Enables out-of-the-box workflows like cloning and versioning Git subdirectories, updating from upstream. Rather than expressing configuration as code, it represents it as data. Okay. I did not realize this then. Because for Terraform, they say infrastructure as code, but it's not really code. Where is my Terraform stuff? I don't remember. Maybe it's up a directory. There it is. Yeah, so here's where I made all of my own stuff. Let's just look at one of these files, like account server.tf. This is what Terraform looks like. This is not really code. Like this resource could be put below the other one or above the other one. It does have a syntax to it, but it's not like I'm calling functions here. And so that's what I thought Kubernetes would be, and it sounds like it's language agnostic, so maybe I should understand Kubernetes fully before I go into some of these other ones. This sounds like it's a more declarative structure for describing infra than code would be. And then what's customized? Kubernetes native configuration management introduces a template-free way to customize application configuration that simplifies the use of off-the-shelf applications. This looks pretty much like what config connector, or no, what kept is. Is it pretty much the same? Went to NDC London. I was at a workshop. One of the things the instructor showed us was an interactive playground. Yeah, Crichton, you can link it here. Yeah. So, yeah, I think if there's... Did they talk about this here at all? Did they talk about customize? It aligns with how tools developed by... Learn about this in a high-level comparison with customize. Okay, so I think they're both here to solve the same problems. Yeah, that's my guess. Google Container Tools. So, kept versus customize. Maybe they're not. Whatever. I'll just write this down though. So, this seems like it's supposed to solve the same problems as kept, but I may be missing something, i.e. declarative structure for infra. All right, well then I think I kind of answered my own question of how should I proceed with, yeah, let's just keep going through the table of contents here. So we were talking about the API. Let's keep going through this. I don't know if I'm going to end up taking too many notes on this. Implements alternative protobuf-based serialization format that's primarily intended for intra-cluster communication. Protobuf serialization design proposal. Yeah, I guess this is if you really care about performance from the API perspective, that you want to cram everything into as small a space as possible. Because otherwise... Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this is pretty much just for performance. Okay. Any system that's successful needs to grow and change as new use cases emerge or existing ones change. Therefore, Kubernetes has designed its feature to allow the Kubernetes API to continuously grow and change. The project aims to not break compatibility with existing clients and to maintain that compatibility for a length of time. In general, new ones can be added often and frequently. Elimination requires following API deprecation policy. This kind of almost sounds like it should go without saying, but sure, let's see what their policy is for this. I guess they said support for a year for each of their releases that they might have. Yeah, I'm not gonna read through this. That's fine. So to make it easier to eliminate fields or restructure resource representations, they support multiple API versions. Yep, cool. Versioning is done at the API level rather than a resource or field. Yep. Sounds totally fine. This is, in my mind, like a, how should I say this? Like a mentality that you take on API design. And this seems sane enough to me, so I think it's just good knowing it's sane, but not really too much to write about here. Thanks, Crichton. Yeah, I'll write that down. Probably the de facto standard of Google, I can imagine. Yeah, I would imagine too. If you're doing anything in a massive scale, saving the time on not having to encode and decode JSON is probably worthwhile. Custom resource let you declaratively define how the API server should provide your chosen resource API. So what does this link to? Because this sounds a whole lot like kept and customized. Did they mention those things here? No. Hey Wes, how's it going? And yeah, Kubernetes finally. I remember people were talking pretty extensively about this back when I was trying to settle on how I would scale botland containers. And back then, I ended up just going with Amazon's Fargate. And I think it was the right choice, even looking back. I don't think I needed anything major from this. But still, just an mock about. But that's good because that is what will let you know that you shouldn't schedule your interviews yet. And I honestly mean that. That's not supposed to be derogatory or anything. Like, that's the whole point of mock interviews. If you do poorly, great. You get feedback on how you can do better. If you do great, awesome. Then you're already great. So learn how to extend it by adding your own. Okay, so I don't care too much about this. I think it's good to just have an overview of this, which we got. So now let's move on to this, which I did not realize that this would expand into so many different things. Okay, so then we'll need to go through these. Okay, understanding Kubernetes objects. This page explains how Kubernetes objects are represented in the API and how you can express them in YAML format. Yeah, so this is what made me think that this would be declarative, but maybe that's just the objects that are declarative. I'm still trying to figure out how one might use this. So why did tools like KPT and Customize pop up at all? I originally thought that Kubernetes itself had a declarative interface to it, but yeah. So I need to, so yeah, either that's wrong or it wasn't sufficient for the community. All right, Kubernetes objects are persistent entities. We should probably go back to the glossary for a sec and see if object is a formal term. No. Or if it is, it's a subterm under something else. Like core object is what it's really called. I don't know. Yeah, well, whatever. Let's keep reading. So our persistent entities in the Kubernetes system. Kubernetes uses these entities to represent the state of your cluster. Specifically, they can describe what containerized applications are running and on which nodes. Okay, resources available, and policies around how they behave, such as restart policies, upgrades, and fault tolerance. A Kubernetes object is a record of intent. Once you create the object, the Kubernetes system will constantly work to ensure that the object exists. By creating an object, you're effectively telling the Kubernetes system that you want your cluster's workload, what you want your cluster's workload to look like. This is the desired state. Okay, so we learned about this, that this is what the controller's jobs are, is to shift toward that desired state, and that desired state seems like it's represented via object. Yes. So I guess we'll just write object here. So the desired state of your application is represented via these objects. They are persistent entities. Persistent entities in the Kubernetes system. Yeah. Okay. To work with them, whether to create, modify, or delete them, you'll need to use the API. When you use the kubectl command line interface, for example, the CLI makes the necessary Kubernetes API calls for you. Aha! So this kind of answers my question about why do these tools pop up, that it's not fully declarative, that the API has some way of creating this, and it... No, but then why? I guess the API is just for taking in those YAML files? Hmm. Okay, maybe it doesn't answer my question yet. Let's keep reading. Almost every Kubernetes object includes two nested object fields that govern the object's configuration, the spec and the status. For objects that have a spec, you have to set this when you create the object, providing a description of the characteristics you want the resource to have, its desired state. And then status describes the current state, supplied and updated by the Kubernetes system. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. The control plane continually and actively manages every object's actual state to match the desired state you've supplied. Okay. For example, in Kubernetes, a deployment is an object that can represent an application running on your cluster. When you create the deployment, you might set the deployment spec to specify that you want 3 replicas to be running. Kubernetes system reads the deployment spec and starts 3 instances, updating the status to match the spec. If any of those should fail, it responds to the difference between spec and status by making a correction. In this case, starting a replacement instance. Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, not bad. If I already posted the content you're going to go over today, don't want to repeat something you already know or steer down a path that isn't very helpful. So the content I plan on going over today is pretty much just working my way through the table of contents here. And since some of these expand to form other large sections, I doubt we'll make it all the way through because I only want to stream for another probably couple hours. So after I get done with all those things, I wanted to learn about some of these technologies. Now, what I expect to have happen, so like I said, there's a Google offer either probably today or tomorrow. What I expect to have happen is I choose a starting date and I get in touch with my eventual manager, and then I can ask specific questions about what I should learn. So for now, I'm just trying to cover breadth and make sure that I can understand terminology, history, how pieces connect, the architecture. But we're probably not going to actually do anything with Kubernetes on the stream. That's my guess. So the way I'm going about doing this, I know will probably seem a bit strange. If those tools are similar to Helm, it helps in deploying some same containers with different application, different database deployment for different. Oh, you were correct. Okay, with different configuration, different database deployment for different applications. Yeah. So what I understand of these is they sound very much like how Terraform sounded to me. Which, like I said, I pulled up a Terraform file I have from Botland, and how I said, "Hey, I need this in Amazon, and here are all the things it needs to have." And then I supplied this file to... Actually, what did run this file? I guess Terraform itself ran this. Yeah, so I've supplied this to Terraform. Terraform knows how to interface with AWS to get this set up the way that I expect and compare the current state to this desired state. And in essence, that sounds like what Kubernetes is trying to do. And I was trying to figure out whether this was imperative or declarative. And it sounds like it's some combination of the two. Like this to me, a YAML format seems to imply that it's declarative, but then the API seems to imply that it's somewhat imperative as well. So I will hopefully find out a little more about that. But like I said, I'm probably not going to be actually doing this. So I won't maybe find all the particulars. Now, as I mentioned, by the way, the job is about, all I know really is cloud configuration. So it is not that I'm using Kubernetes necessarily, but I think the concepts are important to know. So it's entirely possible that I already know everything I need to know and that I should stop and go learn something else. But without being able to talk to my eventual manager, I can't find out if I've gone too far or not far enough. So this page isn't too much longer. I don't necessarily want to write what's just contained here. Well, yeah, let's keep going then. So describing an object. When you describe an object, you must provide the object spec that describes its desired state, as well as some basic information about it, such as a name. When you use the API to create it, that API request must include that information as JSON in the request body. Okay, so the API is going to be responsible for converting from YAML to JSON. That's fine. Yeah, oh yeah, it says right here. Okay, great. So here's an example YAML file that shows the required fields and object spec for Kubernetes deployment. Okay. This seems pretty straightforward. Yeah, this seems pretty straightforward. Now, I don't know all the fields here, right? But I can see that there's a spec, and then within that there's a template, and that itself has a spec, and this looks sort of like a Docker file that we might have, or Docker, whatever it's called. Forgot the Docker Compose, I think. Yeah, let me look that up. Have I transferred it? No, I haven't. I started. There's so much work. So I then stopped. Yeah, it looks kind of like this, I would say. We have image. We can specify ports. Yeah. Okay. One way to create a deployment using a YAML file like the one above is to use kubectl apply, passing the YAML file as an argument. Sounds fine. Output is similar to this, that it created it. Yeah, and in this sense, it kind of looks like Terraform, I guess. Required fields in the YAML file for the Kubernetes object you want to create, you'll need to set values for the following fields: API version, kind, metadata, spec. Do we have all this here? Yep. Yep. So is it one YAML file per thing? Okay, but yeah, not too bad actually. Hey, detonated. Yeah, Docker Compose. Got it. Thank you, Romania. What happened with the new job? Yeah, check out the today command. So the today command. Hang on one second. I'm typing this mostly for myself. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the today command has the update in the first paragraph, which is I'm waiting for an offer, which I should probably monitor my email to see. No, still nothing. I think it'll be today. I kind of hope it'll be today so that I can stop saying things so tentatively. At the very least, so I can have some concrete, like, yes, now this is the next step, and here's when it'll happen. I wonder if it happened today and everything looked rock solid in the contract or whatever it is that gets sent over. I don't know what the likelihood of me even being able to start on the 5th would be. I know you can't see the calendar, it's behind my face, but it's the calendar for the whole world. But yeah, that might be too short notice. All right, so let's go to object management next. Supports several different ways to create and manage objects. The document provides an overview of the different approaches. Read the book for details of managing objects. Okay. Objects should be managed using only one technique. Mixing and matching results in undefined behavior. So imperative commands, and then there's declarative object configuration. Operates on directories and files. So this sounds very similar to Terraform then. And it also sounds like we have the answer to the question finally. Where is that? Yeah, this. So my guess is that the answer is simplicity. Hey, Strix. And thanks, T. Yeah, they gave me a range for what I can expect out of total compensation, which I will not be sharing on stream. And yeah, the range sounds good to me. So I told him my expected amount was at the high end of that range, but let's see what happens. So yeah, that's my guess. I start tomorrow. All right, maybe we should write this down though somewhere of working with Kubernetes objects. Yeah, I feel like I should, and just maybe trim this down if I need to. Why sharing DMs? No. So imperative versus declarative. And they only recommend the. Okay, So there are three ways to manage what objects? Yeah. Purely imperative. You use operates on live objects. You use a series of commands to alter the state. Yeah, okay. What happened? What's the command? Oh yeah, the today command. Yeah, yeah. What's the average salary for a normal software developer in the USA? Looking for something remote, but I don't know what kind of compensation. Check out Stack Overflow developer survey. At least I think it's got the answer to this. I'll link this in the chat regardless of whether it does. But I'm pretty sure we just search for dollar signs, for example. Yeah. This is, you can click United States. Check this out. So whatever job you're looking for, let's say you wanted a job in JavaScript. So we can look at JavaScript and we can see that the, what is this for? Is this median salary? Yeah. So this is the median salary for JavaScript developers. Now, remember, this did not break down by seniority, by framework, at least not this part. So there's a lot more data in this document, but this gives you kind of an idea. Have I started the new gig yet? No. The today command talks a little bit more about that, but in short, it's still waiting for the offer. Okay, so imperative object configuration. So imperative plus declarative. You define YAML files per object and run a command to set that as the desired state. And then finally, it's like purely declarative. You define folders of YAML files that specify the state of your entire, I'll just say specify the entire desired state, i.e. all objects. I don't think you guys should draw conclusions necessarily of things like I'm underpaid or I'm way behind. And the reason why is because, remember, like I said, this doesn't take into account seniority, framework, specificity of the knowledge that you have. Tough word to make sure you type the right number of I's. So if you're an entry-level JavaScript developer, for example, I don't know, maybe you make like 70,000, and maybe it's just that it's a very senior-heavy industry or something, and that's where the numbers are coming out to like 160K, or I have no idea what, right? So the way I think you really go into looking at this is that you find jobs comparable to yours in the area you're working in, even if it's remote, and that will help you triangulate what your final salary kind of should be. Also remember that years of tenure at your current place can lead to a slightly less competitive salary, i.e. jumping from job to job maximizes money sometimes. So yeah, like I said, I wouldn't just immediately get to this conclusion, and it's possible that is the conclusion you should get to, but not necessarily from that one number. Didn't know it was accurate enough as a summary. Yeah, I really think, like I said, I think the only accurate thing is going to be just looking at jobs that you might want and seeing what they pay. Because let's say you find out that you're actually underpaid by like $20,000. That might actually sort of be expected based on what I say here. Of, well, if you're not just jumping to other companies, your own company is not going to pay you as much as they would pay a new employee at your same level. So it might be like, okay, well, that's fine. You know, is finding a new job worth an extra 20K a year for you? Is a decision you have to make. But yeah, if you find out that you're not happy with whatever those results are, you got to make sure that it's realistic to expect the results that you got in your head. Answers warranted by new developers. I see. Got a job in my second ever interview. Awesome. Congratulations, Kojin. Congrats. And you're severely underpaid, but you're stuck in a contract? Yeah. You know, they say you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. If you consider that contract to be a mistake, then you will probably put in extra effort next time for looking into that stuff. And then again, something else I guess you could kind of consider is like a contract breaking fee. But Yeah. Okay, so when using imperative commands, okay. Let's put this here as a reference. A user operates directly on live objects in a cluster. Yep. Simplest way is to run a one-off task in a cluster. Provides no history of previous configurations. Yep, sounds pretty much fine. Trade-offs. Commands are simple. Commands require only a single step. Don't integrate the change review process. No audit trail. Yeah. Okay, all this stuff is fine. Like this is basically what, if you probably look at the Terraform docs, why they would say this is a good idea not to use this. And we're eventually going to get to, at the bottom of this, purely declarative. Yeah, software jobs paying more or less in other countries, I think it's also really hard to compare because your salary will go toward different things with your free money. So in the US, for example, you would have, let's say, like education costs that you might not have in Europe. Actually, I don't know about Canada. Does Canada pay for higher education? Like as a student, do you end up paying for textbooks and stuff and that's it? Don't think so. Yeah. Yeah, currency rates as well. And also just something else to consider is like where do you want to live in your life? That doesn't matter as much with software because you can find more remote jobs, but if you like a particular town or state or country, it almost doesn't really matter because you have to deal with the jobs over there. You have to pay for everything, and Canada underpays for devs. Yeah, kind of funny. Yeah. All right. It specifies the operation, optional flags, at least one file name. File must have YAML or JSON. Yep. So you define configuration. I shouldn't say YAML. And run a command to set that as the desired state. So that's here. Yep. And they say the trade-offs for this. Yep, that's fine. Yep. It can integrate. It's not as part of it, I guess. Provides a template. Disadvantages. Require basic understanding. That's fine. Additional step of writing the file. Narrative is simpler and easier to understand. It's more mature. So maturity and simplicity, I guess. They said Kubernetes 1.5 though, and I think they're up to a higher version of Kubernetes. Kubernetes current version 1.19. Yeah. But that kind of implies. I mean that's 14 minor versions. Kind of implies that would have been a long time ago, right? Just finished your master in CS. I have no idea what area of tech to work. Any tips? Whenever someone asks about this, what I usually suggest is try small projects in many areas. And unfortunately, small projects, this operative word here, is not easily doable depending on the area you want to get into. So some areas I always kind of talk about are things like game development, let's say things like graphics, networking, utilities, algorithms, machine learning. There's like any number of things, right? Web development, I think, is another big one to consider here. And so a small project in some of these would be easily doable. Like game development, you go pick up a game engine, you try out making Breakout or Tetris or something like that, and cool, you see if you like it. But I think that's going to tell you way more than any other theoretical thing that we might talk about. You might also find that you've steered yourself toward a particular area in your experience. So in doing a master's degree, you spent somewhere between 4 to 6 years probably. And in that time, you were probably said like, oh yeah, here, just go work on a project that uses this coding language. And whatever you picked for that is probably going to help steer you toward whatever you're doing here. And internships, yep, for sure, could be one way. When I say small projects, it doesn't really matter, I think, what medium you're doing them through, whether it's internships, whether it's just a personal project, whether you try to make a product out of it even. Although I would advise against this if you're just doing it to learn what realm you like. So I guess that means it's more mature now. Hey, Red Rocks. Oh man, nice, Revrox. Yeah, good job. FAQ Telecom Network. What? Nine? And hey, Crows. Um, yeah, the master's being very theoretical. You might have had something in your undergrad that might have steered you towards something. But regardless, I still this is my advice at least is that I would try some of these things or at least research what they might involve. So a small project is ideal, but you can probably narrow down this list, and this was just a sampling anyway. You can probably narrow down this list to, three or four things that sound interesting, and then go pursue what those might do. All right, so let's keep going here. Best on files, not directories. Updates of live objects must be reflected in configuration files or they'll be lost. Okay, sure. And then when using declarative, a user operates on object configuration files stored locally. Does not define the operation to be taken. They're automatically detected by kubectl. And kubectl detects how to reconcile that configuration. Thanks, Chaz. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah. One of the things I'm curious about, do they have average tenure at FANG companies? Mm, does anyone know how you'd find this at software companies? This is from 2016. I don't even know if this is good. Excuse me. This is median tenure. So it's actually lowest at these three companies. Huh. Yeah, and remember, this is 2016. I don't know how they got their data. Because I've actually heard that even for a company like Amazon, that it's a year and a half now, or something like that. Hey, Bifo. Can we have chat vote on pronunciation? I'd probably call it cube control, but I've been saying kubectl. Hey, Heyman. Okay, so I copied this one down. I want to read about their trade-offs here. They retain even if they're not merged back into the configuration files. What? Why is that an advantage? Because they didn't write that here, and that would be an advantage there as well. Better support for operating on directories and automatically detecting operation types. Declarative object configuration is harder to debug and understand results. Partial updates using diff create complex merge and patch operations. Yeah, interesting. From LinkedIn. Okay. I'm laughing because a blog post with like a picture every half page. I wanted to see if there was some. Yeah, this is. Oh, this is average, not median, I guess. Is there some just quick summary at the end of all of this that just puts them side by side in a table? No. Ugh. Fine. Search. Amazon's not even listed here. Facebook, 2.5 years. Google, 3.2. Microsoft, not listed. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, thank you for linking it regardless. Why do I look serious? I'm deadly serious all the time. That's why. I'm going to be looking into Terraform or Helm too. I have not actually looked into Helm. I use Terraform for Botland. Helm software, I guess. Yeah, maybe I'll look into this in a little bit too. Look into Helm. So note that I wasn't told by the manager about this, but it's related technology. Shouldn't it be learned together with some provisioning system like Ansible? I can't say. I have now been learning Kubernetes for about 2.5 hours, so it's early on. But the technologies I already kind of knew from this are Ansible, Terraform, and Docker. And I've got public notes on all of those things. So if you want any of those notes, just type the notes command, and then you kind of have to hunt for them a little bit. Ansible's in programs, Terraform might be as well. Actually, all of them are probably in programs. But yeah, I last used Ansible back in like 2016. Oh, did I answer your question? Let me see. Did I use something like GKE, or do you host Kubernetes yourself and configure it completely? So first of all, no, I didn't answer your question because I didn't see it. And second, I don't use anything right now. I have, like I said, I spent about 2.5 hours learning Kubernetes, and I've done nothing with it so far. And I also don't plan on doing anything with it. The reason why I'm doing any of this is in the today command, which I now just linked. Yeah. I messed around with Terraform, whatever we need to. Helm seems more intuitive. Yeah, I have a Terraform file open right here, and I wrote a bunch of Terraform files for this stuff. Actually, I have quite a lot. Wow. Yeah, and this was not really trivial to learn. There's quite a lot to it, and it's also kind of hard to convince yourself as a single developer to do this sort of thing. So yeah, all these things are configured here. Oh man, I remember struggling with some of these options. Like, look at this. If I type a rage face into a comment, you know there's got to be some problem here. I don't know why I need to specify this when it's optional, but Terraform applies complaining at me. From what I can tell, the default is 100. Yeah, the things like this where I'm just like, I have no clue what this is, and I need to figure it out because I'm trying to instantiate some resources here. So, yeah. Now, DevOps is a job that's becoming more and more common, I feel. And that, like, some poor sap at one of these companies has to go learn all this stuff and maintain it all. And yeah. So I think that's kind of what this team might be working on, is hoping to alleviate, is make it so that these saps have to learn a little less. I'm saying sap lovingly here. I had to do this for the last 5 years for like, no, I shouldn't say for the last 5 years, but for Botland, for, a 4-year long project. And I felt like a sap. Hard to imagine a real life problem to learn from technology. Wait. So I don't know if I said small projects or small problems, but I meant just projects. I don't know if you're responding to somebody else. But let's say you were to take, like, I want to make a utility program. It doesn't have to be a new utility program. To see if you like it, all you have to do is just make something. So my suggestion when people want to learn something like game development is usually to try something like Tetris or try something like Pong at first. And one of the big reasons why is because there's a lot of game design behind even simple games. So Tetris, there's no way to get into an impossible board state. And if you have, then you've lost because the board is too high up or something, right? But like, that's part of the game design of Tetris, the scoring system, the UI layout. Those are all things you don't have to focus on if you're cloning something. Likewise, if you want to make like an Instagram clone, you don't have to do any of those things either. You don't have to worry about, like, okay, what's the goal of the product? What does the UI look like? You just go make features and work on what you think is interesting there. And my caveat to all of that is, obviously, don't ever try claiming it as your own, and don't try selling it without differentiating yourself somehow. But for learning, it is perfect. Just take something, clone it, and see what you can do on your own. Hey, Liz. Okay, so I think this is pretty good. We covered all this stuff. And now let's keep going down. Object names and IDs. Each object in your cluster has a name that's unique for that type of resource. It also has a UID that's unique across your whole cluster. Do you define the UIDs? For example, you can only have one pod named myapp1234. You can have one pod and one deployment that are each named myapp1234. For non-unique user-provided attributes, they use labels and annotations. And this is within namespaces as well, which, yeah, I don't think this is worth writing down, though. This is the kind of thing where, let's say you mess this up and you name two things database, then it'll just complain at you and you'll fix it. Then you know for sure you're struggling with stuff you want to learn. Yep. That's exactly it. Yep. because it's so easy to get lost in the weeds of some of these things. You know, let's say you were making Instagram and you were like, okay, well, we need to make a login system. And so we're going to need a username and a password. And then we're going to need to store like auth data in a token somewhere or in a cookie. And it's like, are you doing what you want to do? Because whenever I need to do this, I just put a login with Atom button and it just says like, cool, you're the Atom user now or something, you know? And then I can go focus on what I wanted to, which maybe is an image carousel or, I don't know, WebSockets open to give notifications to people. So same thing with making Tetris. It's like, why bother making game UI unless that's what you want to do? In which case, then clone the gameplay and not the UI. All right, names. A client provided string refers to an object such as this. Only one object of a given kind. These are not the kinds of things that I necessarily care about, to be honest. Not right now, at least. Except for this, maybe. It's a system-generated string to uniquely identify objects. This part is kind of interesting. And they're UUIDs. Okay. It's probably not super important to even write that down. Nah, it's not even super important to write that down. Let's move on. All right, namespaces. Namespaces might be worthwhile to write down. Supports multiple virtual clusters backed by the same physical cluster. These virtual clusters are called namespaces. All right, that seems pretty important. Let's get this and write this over here. Namespace. A virtual cluster within your physical cluster. Thank you, Hodor. Well, a way of supporting multiple virtual clusters within your physical cluster. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then the full reference is here. When to use. They're intended for use in environments with many users spread across multiple teams or projects. For clusters with a few to tens of users, you should not need to create or think about namespaces. Start using them when you need the features they provide. They provide a scope for names. Names or resources need to be unique within a namespace, but not across namespaces. I mean, I guess we'll write this down here, right? Namespace. Names of objects only have to be unique per object type within a namespace. That's kind of what namespaces are. Pretty much everywhere namespaces are used, even in coding. So, Alan. And I hope I still stream. I've said this before that I want to do something. I don't know if it's going to be streaming. I don't know if it's going to be YouTube videos. I don't know if it's going to be blog posts or just who knows what. But I want to do something and I want to figure out how I can provide value for you guys and not break my back, you know, working a full-time job and then trying to like cram this in anyway. So I want it to make sense. So much of my viewpoints have changed over the last 5 or 10 years. In the last 5 years, I'd worked on Botland, and I think one of the biggest learnings was that MVP is king. And I'm going to make a blog post on what all the biggest learnings really were from that. But this is just massive to me. And so with an MVP, which for those who don't know is a minimum viable product, you're building typically like the smallest vertical of your application. So let's say it's a game, then you've got like a way of starting the game, the kind of the gameplay loop, and I don't know, maybe whatever core features you might need. You know, like a couple of levels. And that's it. You're not gonna, if you were making Mario Brothers, you're not gonna go make all 8 worlds. You're gonna make like 1 or 2 worlds, and people can get an idea of if they like it. When you focus on the MVP, one of the things that you're almost necessarily doing compared to a full product is spending less time on it because of the word minimum in this. And by doing so, this whole thing ties back to what I was talking about with streaming, because I think there are a lot of ideas I'd like to pursue, and I could probably find some way to pursue them when I'm focusing on just, okay, what's the minimum here? When they say users, do they mean departments or other services? When they say users here, I think they're talking about that you have the number of users for your system. But I'm not totally sure yet. I don't think they mean end users. I think they mean people who are interacting with this. But yeah, I don't know for sure. How do you position your hand when pressing Windows key and number? As in which fingers do I use? I use my thumb for Windows key and then, let's see, middle finger for 1. Yeah, pointer finger for 4. Pointer finger for like 3 plus, I guess. Seems to be what I use. And part of the reason for that is I don't have a right Windows key on my keyboard. I have an emoji button. It's the one thing about this keyboard that doesn't make any sense. And I rebound it to be the apps key, but I don't think I can rebind it to be the Windows key. So I also bound the caps lock key. Caps lock on my keyboard is Windows. So, I mean, that's the only way to really prove this. If I press this button, you see it popping up the menu. And I did that with auto hotkey. All right. Between multiple users via resource quota. What is this? When several users or teams share a cluster. Okay, yeah. This answers what your question was, Moon. This is users of the infrastructure. So basically developers on the team. Which I don't know what scenario this is for exactly. They say when several users share a cluster with a fixed number of nodes, there's a concern that one team could use more than its fair share of resources. When does this happen? Like, everyone who's contesting these resources all reports the same person at some point, right? So, I don't know. That seems a little weird to me, but I guess it can happen. Although I don't know how namespaces would even help you with that. Someone still needs to set those quotas somewhere. Anyway, yeah, sure. I guess it at least gives you a technical way of setting it rather than a policy way of setting it within a company. All right, so divide cluster resources. Yeah, namespaces can also be used to divvy up resources from a technical perspective. That way, namespace A can only use like 30% of the resources. Prevents accidents. Yeah, having a technical way to do that to prevent accidents, I guess, would be fine. And I suppose probably what the scenario is teams getting sloppy and just saying like, you know what, this needs to be faster. Well, let's just use all the resources. And that probably does happen, so fine. Is there an equivalent to Kubernetes? Yeah, there is, in the form of either Docker Swarm or Docker Compose. I don't remember the difference. Key difference is that it schedules and manages them across multiple machines. Yeah, so Docker Swarm, I think, is one of the equivalents. And then if you probably just look up like Kubernetes equivalents or competitors or something, you can probably find some alternatives. Yeah. Okay, future versions, objects will have the same access control policies by default. You know what would be nice is to know when this was written. But nah, doesn't matter. Not necessary to use multiple namespaces, just to separate slightly different resources, such as different versions. Use labels to distinguish resources within the same namespace. Prefer the use, or like, yeah, the use of labels over namespaces when just differentiating versions of the same software. Shouldn't say the same software, right? The same object. Oh, HashiCorp has its own flavor of containers? I don't think I heard about that. Nomad? Huh. I might want to look into that briefly too. HashiCorp's Nomad. Again, it's just tangentially related technology. that may be interesting to learn a bit about. Do I have a career end goal like making your own successful startup or being a CEO? I think that Adam Learns was like the best fit for a job that I'd ever have. However, one thing that was a negative that I don't know if I ever really talked about as being such a negative is that it was a ton of work. It was the most work I've ever done in my life. And I would not be able to keep up with the pace that I was going at. But even just from a motivation standpoint, it's it's a little bit freeing and thrilling to have a different kind of project or task every 2 or 3 weeks. But at some point, it feels like chaos. I was working on I was working on a bunch of different things and the time that I did spend doing Adam Learns. And while they had mostly to do with monetization or game development, they were kind of all over the place, right? Like hacking is very different from learning Godot, which is very different from learning a bunch of programming languages. And so after a year or two of doing this, not very long really, after a year or two of doing this, I imagine you get to the point where, okay, I've learned all the stuff I wanted to learn. Now I'm just learning academically. And that's where I think it'd be very tough to motivate myself. So I don't know. I think my end career goal would be finding something that's like this that combines all the things I want out of a job. And maybe it happens after I'm already sort of like financially free, let's say. And maybe it happens to try to get that financial freedom. I don't know. That's a really weird username. There are a lot of weird usernames on Twitch. All right, working with namespaces. Creation and deletion described in the admin guide. Yeah, don't prefix them with cube. List the current namespaces. Okay, sure. Oh, my Windows username. It was auto-generated, that's why. I thought you were talking about one of the last few people to type in chat. Alright, default namespace. Yep, I don't care about that. Setting namespace for a request. Use the namespace flag. So you can run certain things in a particular namespace. Requests themselves can be run in specific namespaces via kubectl. Yeah. Setting namespace preference. When you create a service, it creates a corresponding DNS entry. Entries of the form, service name, not namespace name, SVC cluster local. Okay, yeah, this all sounds fine. Hey, Jack. About a month ago, came here for advice on career change from sales to dev. Today, I got a final offer for the company after 2 technical projects from the team. It's a 15% pay cut for my current role. Having a hard time convincing myself to take this leap of faith. Let me refamiliarize myself with some of the messages you sent before, just to make sure I'm on the same page here. Pair program. So okay, I don't remember what advice I gave you back in like the May-June time frame, because I guess that's when you'd asked about this stuff. But I think this is a pretty powerful motivator. So at one point, I went from Microsoft to another job, and I took a pretty big pay cut as well. And that job was in I was in the game industry. So I did something kind of similar to what you were planning on doing. You're in a position that's making more money. You're going to take a 15% pay cut, but it's in an industry that you are aiming for. And it sounds like you're not positive that you're going to like the industry. I think I think there are a lot of factors at play here. So it's probably almost maybe too much to talk about right now, but for one, is a 15% pay cut going to like break the bank basically? Like, can you still afford rent or a mortgage? Can you still afford your lifestyle? And also in the future, what's the opportunity for career progression, raises, and how long do you think you'll be there? There are so many different things to consider here that it's very hard to say whether this is, oh yeah, this is just a bad idea, or yes, this is just a good idea. Yeah, so like I said, I think this had to be a much longer conversation about this stuff. With that said, that is one conclusion, is that this isn't necessarily bad just because you're taking a 15% pay cut. Hey, faceless bar. Not everything is namespace, but the most common resources are. So, it had to be a dream job for me to take a pay cut. It impacts your future earnings so much. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of hard to say. So I can talk a little bit about my own career. So Microsoft, let's say I made like X dollars, right? At the next job, whose name I never shared, I'm pretty sure. I don't know exactly what the pay cut was. Let's say it was like a 20 to 30% pay cut though. Then the next job was, it was basically Twitch, where I would say I took a like a 70 to 80% pay cut. Maybe even more than that. 70 to 90%. I don't know, something like that. And then the next job is likely going to be Google, where compared to Twitch, I'm making a lot more money. So I don't know. Over my career, it's sort of been all over the place as far as pay has gone. And I don't think you can generalize based on my experience or any one person's experience. But I don't necessarily, this is why I say it's all based on like, can you afford to do this? What are you aiming for out of your career? I think on an ideal level, everyone in life should be aiming for happiness, and what that means differs for people, but that's not what actually ends up happening. We're swayed by our opportunities, our biases. And so some people end up steering themselves more toward money when it's not actually what makes them happy, let's say. And some people think something, I don't want to get too philosophical here. So yeah, I think this is something for you to ponder quite a lot, and that the people closer to you in your life, your friends and family, can likely give you better advice than I could, even though I'm in the industry. So I probably talked for too long about that. All right, not all objects are in a namespace. Yep, this is probably worth saying. Hey, Mike, you got a good deal at Twitch. What I mean is, I never pushed for monetization really, except for one time. And so I always had a very low sub count compared to, I think, other streamers in the same space as me. And yeah, that meant that paychecks were pretty light. And I never had set up a Patreon until just this year, and then I canceled it in the same year. So did not make a lot of money in the last 5 years. Okay, I think this is pretty good. Let's keep moving on. Labels and selectors. I don't think the streaming side of things gives you money necessarily. I think that there's money in coding, and so streaming can be extra. And there are a couple of streamers you guys might have seen here who do this sort of setup. So CM Griffing is one of them, who does a lot of his contracting work on stream. And who's the other person I'm thinking of, whose name I can picture their face. I can't picture their name. Codephobia. Yeah. So these are a couple of streamers who are doing their main work on stream, and the main work is paid, and they accept subscribers, but like that's probably just gravy for them. So yeah, I don't think at the current time that streaming is the way to make money. I think it'd have to be through like a YouTube channel, a Patreon, and a bunch of extra stuff, like sponsorships, for example. But just being on Twitch, I don't think you'll ever get to that level of audience with coding. Now you compare that to someone like Shroud, who's probably making enough through just Twitch subs to be a very good salary. Yeah, Physium, this part about did you negotiate your offer and the recruiter came back with a no. I don't think you have much leverage here right now. And so what you might be able to ask for is like a sign-on bonus at least. And maybe that'll offset that 15%. Yeah, imagine having Shroud numbers while coding. You wouldn't be able to really interact at that point though. Or maybe you could. Or you'd sacrifice one of the two things, interactivity or productivity. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of times you couldn't do the main work on stream. So Codephobia talked to me about this a little bit. He said that he just works it into the contract that he will be streaming this. And that's it. So now if you need work from him, like that's part of the package. And to be honest, I think that's probably fine for most people when they realize what that means. But yeah, not just by default, for sure. Yeah. Okay, so labels are key value pairs that are attached to objects such as pods. Labels are intended to be used to specify identifying attributes that are meaningful. So it seems like most systems that I've seen have something like this, where it's like, hey, you add some more data. We don't have a formal structure for it, so just cram it into labels or something. Even AWS does this for a lot of their resources, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, okay, yeah. Now, the one thing they say that is a little strange, they say labels can be attached at creation time and subsequently added and modified. They don't actually mention deletion, though, but I'm assuming you can delete labels. So labels are just key value pairs that can be anything you want. Wait, you seriously never learned Kubernetes? No, I didn't. Pretty much all of what I've done over the last 5 years, as far as learning goes, has been live on stream. So if you don't see it in one of these notebooks, chances are I didn't really learn it. If you modify, okay, yeah, you can delete it. Okay, yeah. Doing free work, solving the company's problem. Yeah, twisted. I find a lot of exceptions in the interview process, things that I just don't like, and this is one of them that I think is one of the worst. The homework problems that I had were all ones that clearly had no company value. So it'd be something like, just for example, like sort an array of numbers. It's like there's no value for this. You could call it dot sort if you wanted to. Now that's an example. I'm trying to get at that, like you can picture a problem where you're solving an algorithmic challenge for the company. But I never got something like that. I definitely wouldn't want to do that either. So you got a job working on Kubernetes, but have never used Kubernetes. It's not, from what I understand, it's not working on Kubernetes, but I'm not totally sure. And like I said, he was kind of secretive. But I asked, I thought this was kind of funny. I said something like this. I said, how important is it to know these technologies before coming into the company? And so I phrased the question this way so that it sounded almost like this was the whole question. How important is it to know about Kubernetes? And his face kind of dropped when I asked him that. And then I finished my sentence and he's like, oh, no, well, ideally, and I think his phrasing was ideally we'd have a deep expert in these technologies, but they can be learned. I think that's what he said. So I said like, okay, well, I will try to learn them before coming in then. I don't think I'll reach the deep expert level in any of this. But yeah. I'm going to be working on or with it at Google. Yeah, like I said, I don't know to what capacity it's going to be. All I know is that it's a cloud configuration team and that it is at least going to touch on this stuff. But I don't know if it's going to be to the level where I need to say like, okay, so you've got a scenario with this, this, and this. Here's the exact solution you go with. Or if it's more like, I can just ask someone and what I build is going to be based on it. Oh, I knew what Kubernetes was. I just didn't know all the details. And so far I've been writing a little bit about how it works. I mean, I have not taken very extensive notes yet. Enable the user to map their own organizational structure into system objects without requiring clients to store these mappings. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'll put this here. They're used for anything from versions to departments to release tracks. There we go. Love to see you do Kubernetes the hard way on stream to learn. Is that the name of a book, or are you saying by diving in? Yeah, check the today command, Victor. Yeah. Good job working on the roof. That's a coveted position. Yeah. So I did read about this, that there's Minikube and that there's one other thing. I am likely not going to try it on stream. Oh, I see. Yeah, got it. So it is kind of like a book. Yeah. And thanks for linking that in. What makes it so mysterious? From what I understand so far, that mystery comes from that I think it's mostly like enterprise grade technology that like regular people end up using. And so I think that it ends up doing a lot more than what they might think. And again, this is from a like an almost total outsider perspective. So anyway, what I was going to say though is here's where I stand in my own timeline, which is I'm waiting for an offer from Google. And so at some point in the next like 2 to 3 days, well, business days, I should hopefully be in touch with my eventual manager, whether or not I'm actually working there. And I could just ask, is this the kind of stuff I should be studying? Right now, I am not in touch with that person. I don't have their email address or anything. So all I know is based on what they told me in the team matching meeting, which is like, oh, hey, this is the kind of stuff you should probably know. But I don't get to ask specifics at this point. So this is why I'm not actually installing anything yet and testing it out for myself. Plus, I think probably understanding the concepts is going to be more important than understanding the specifics for right now. And it seems very similar to something like Docker Compose, which I've used. So I'm not sure if it's going to be helpful for me to write YAML files, collect them all up into some directories and then provision my containers into my fake infrastructure. What role is that exactly? It'd be the engineering team. Yeah, I'm definitely not going to be a dev advocate for this. I would be a developer. Okay, syntax I don't care about. We're not learning this right now. Selectors we probably need to know though. It's a lot lower level. Yeah. Yeah, and this is where I was saying I want to learn all of the conceptual parts first. Even just knowing, like I said, I had looked at just the Wikipedia article the other day, and just reading through this was helpful to me to begin with to understand kind of more what is this about, what does it do, and then what are some of the terms, because I'm pretty sure that I'm going to need to know these things inside out. Like, okay, here's what this is for, here's what you use this as a solution. But yeah, I don't know to what extent I'd be using it. Victor, I saw your first message about refer me to Google. I will never refer someone I don't know kind of intimately their work experience and environment. So I can pretty much say that unless we like unless I really got to know your work, I would not be referring you to Google. I wouldn't, and this goes with even real life people that I know, by the way, where if a friend just was randomly like, hey, can you refer me? I would not do that unless I actually knew them. And thank you, Diabetic. Yeah, I hope so too, for sure. Yeah. Okay, so unlike names and UIDs, labels do not provide uniqueness. In general, we expect many objects to carry the same label. So maybe we should split this up into a labels section now. I guess it's about time that I do that. So, wait, what? Why did it link to... Oh, there are just two things that are called label selectors. Labels and selectors, and then label selectors. Okay. Yeah. For the use of labels, they're not unique, and selectors. So it can identify a set of objects. Label selector is a core grouping primitive. label selectors are used to identify objects and are a core grouping primitive of Kubernetes. For example, you may say, give me all of the canary tagged objects. That in quotes. Did job posts require any specific programming language and technologies? Yeah. Sorry, I'm not. I guess what I'm getting caught up on with answering this question is that the job posting, the way this all worked was via team matching, and team matching did give me a blurb of like, we're the botland team, we do whatever. And so they might say something like, okay, we work with JavaScript, we work with Node.js. When they say something like that, yeah, there's generally a set of technologies that you'll have to use. And with this, it was a lot of Kubernetes related stuff and Go. So yeah, it kind of worked out that way, even though it wasn't exactly like a job posting, I guess. All right, I did read about selectors over here and how these are very important. And that's why I came up with this canary example, because I remember that from the other day at least. But let's keep reading about this. So equality-based and set-based. A label selector can be made of multiple requirements, which are comma-separated. All must be satisfied. Okay, so selectors are all and-based. I mean, if it's the API returning this, you could OR them together yourself or do some sort of intersection afterward, I guess. Yeah. So selectors can have multiple conditional clauses that are ANDed together. Okay, so what is equality-based and what is set-based here? Must not overlap. Two instances. The controller can see that as conflicting instructions. Okay. Yeah, I don't think this is probably worth writing down, but I could see why this might matter. There is no OR. Yeah. There is no OR operator. I'd like to link to that too, but it looks like this is the best I can do. All right, equality-based requirement. Equality or inequality-based requirements allow filtering by label keys and values. Matching objects must satisfy all of the specified label constraints, though they may have additional labels as well. Three kinds of operators are admitted. Admitted, isn't it permitted? Equals, double equals, and not equals. The first two represent equality and are simply synonyms. Okay, fine. So there are really only two operators, and they just have three ways of expressing them. While the latter represents inequality. Sure, whatever. Okay, great. So former selects all resources with key equal to environment and value equal to production. Latter selects all resources with key equal to tier. Value distinct from front end. Oh, yeah. Usage scenario is for pods to specify node selection criteria. For example, sample pod below selects nodes with the label accelerator and video. Oh, I just remember something. Okay. Selects this with. Yep. Sounds good. Now, that is very interesting. They're saying that this is the node selector. I thought this was just done based on you specifying labels. Yeah, it's in metadata and then labels. So selectors are not the same as labels. No, you can filter by label keys and value. Huh. You set labels in the nodes and match them with selectors? But this didn't have a labels section here. Hang on a second. All right, that was our lunch negotiations. My wife wanted me to join her for lunch, and I said, "How's half an hour?" She said, no. I said, okay, 10 minutes. So I'll only stream for another 10 minutes. That'll put me at a uptime of 3 hours, 35 minutes. So not exactly what I wanted to hit today, but I would like to get lunch with my wife. So yeah, I want to write this down then. You set labels in the nodes and match them with selectors. Well, yeah, what I said was a little strange is in metadata, normally they have a labels section and they don't here. Instead, they just have the name. They usually identify a thing. Okay. Call that a negotiation. Yes. All right. Don't need to set labels in the pod, but selectors. Well, I think some of this will make sense as I use this, and I'll understand kind of what they mean intuitively. But yeah, for right now, I guess you define selectors separately from labels in the YAML or JSON. And the selector doesn't have to be based on an explicitly defined label. Okay, set-based label requirements allow filtering according to a set of values. 3 kinds of operators are supported: in, not in, and exists. Oh, yeah, okay, so pretty simple. So selectors are either based on equality, equals, or not equals, or sets: in, not in, or exists. Okay. There. I'll become a YAML developer. King of the YAML engineers. So this sounds pretty reasonable to me. This is like any very small query language that you might want. And you can find this in very large query languages like SQL, where you've got these same sorts of things. You could say that like the name equals Adam, or that the ID is in 1, 2, and 5. So yeah. So the first example selects all resources. Yeah, I don't think I need to go through the examples here. Yeah, because if I were actually doing this, I'd look through the documentation. So API list and watch filtering. List and watch operations may specify label selectors to filter the sets of objects returned using a query parameter. Both requirements are permitted. Wait, what? List and watch operations may specify label selectors. So this is for the API that I never actually used. So I'm guessing when they say list all the objects, that's when you can use a selector. Yeah, that's my guess. Both label selector styles can be used to list or watch resources. For example, targeting API server. Okay, yeah. That's what it means. Great, cool. Okay, well, don't care. That seems pretty straightforward. Set references in API objects. Some also use them to specify sets of other resources like pods. So, out of curiosity, when did they cover something like replication controllers? I'm guessing in cluster architecture? Maybe in here? Well, somewhere. I want to at least make it to the bottom of this document and then be able to write where I left off here. So let's finish reading it. The set of pods that a service targets is defined with a label selector. Abstract way to expose a running application on a set of pods. Also note that the set of pods is defined / selected via a label selector. Yeah. Okay, and we're close. Yeah. Thank you both. You're one user under 2 names. All right, define a JSON or YAML file using maps, and only in quality-based requirement selectors are supported. Okay, yeah. Pretty much fine. how do you even say Kubernetes? So I say Kubernetes, but apparently the correct pronunciation is based on, wait, this. I actually want to keep this in here. Pronunciation note. No one says it the official way. Okay, so newer resources support subbase. Don't care about this. Okay, yeah. So I think we're gonna leave this as where I'm gonna resume next time. So where I left off here, and I never wrote this down. So my assumption about why tools like, what are they? KPT and Customize and Customize exist is for simplicity's sake. And perhaps the purely declarative style of managing objects was probably not easy enough for the average person. That sounds condescending. I'll just say for people. Yeah. I don't think I've seen the JavaScript talk, no. Wait, what, Klaska? Did I link to the wrong thing? Let me take a look at this. Oh, I see. It's in the tweet. I didn't actually open the tweet earlier too. Hey, Leander. Yeah, I have Helm written down as well. So here's the thing. And maybe Helm is one of the things I should write down for this. Is Helm another one of the declarative? Fine charts. Yeah. All right. Oops. Maybe Helm. Okay, so like I said, my goal with all of this is just to hit the ground running when I start the job at Google. So I don't know if any of this was helpful for me, but I hope that as I move forward with this, that I can get in touch with my eventual manager and ask, hey, am I on the right track? Because that shouldn't take very long to be like, here are the things you should explicitly learn. Here's what you should be able to do. So for now, we left off at whatever this link is. And tomorrow I plan on streaming, assuming I don't hear any more information today. So if I were to give an update, it would be tomorrow, or it'd be, sorry, today. But I have like 4 trains of thought in my head, and they're colliding, and now 3 are on fire. So let me write one of these things down. Update schedule if I stream tomorrow. Yeah. So that's it for me. Thank you guys for watching. It's good to see everybody again. I will almost certainly be streaming tomorrow, and we'll just pick up where we left off here. So have a good rest of your day. Bye, everybody.